Chapter 1576. The Saint King's tomb collapsed. She was possessed by the green smoke and controlled her body. She used the power of the blood demon Vine's explosion to escape the Saint King's tomb and luckily escaped. But the wound on his face and body couldn't heal no matter what. Feng Yuan and Qing Yan tried their best to treat it, but they couldn't make this huge wound heal even a little bit. Not only that, but the wound also contained a force that constantly eroded and stimulated her wound. Feng Yuan was almost driven crazy by this wound. Not only that, this wound also cut through the meridians in her body. Because this wound couldn't heal, her meridians couldn't heal. At this time, Feng Yuan was no different from a half-cripple. And all of this was thanks to evil Dr. Ghost Eye. Feng Yuan clenched her teeth in resentment. Even if there was a slight chance that she could regain her previous strength, she would not give up. Not to mention, the method that Qing Yan told her could not only restore her strength, but also let her go to the next level and become stronger. She would never let go of such an opportunity. Even if she had to pay an extremely tragic price, she had to get it. Good. The wisp of green smoke said in her mind, then go. Remember, you must be careful in the future. Don't let people find out about the forbidden evil technique on you. Otherwise, you and I will suffer together. The green smoke originally didn't want to teach such a forbidden technique to Feng Yuan. However, after it chose Feng Yuan as the person it carefully selected, it was destined to be with the other party. One's glory, one's loss, all's loss. Feng Yuan had become like this now, and was about to be completely wasted. If it didn't teach her this method, would it become a waste together with her and sink into the sky spill continent? It wasn't willing. The reason it chose Feng Yuan was not to be trapped in the sky spill continent for a lifetime. So it had to teach this forbidden technique to Feng Yuan. It only hoped that after she obtained this method, she would be more cautious in the future and not be discovered by others. Fortunately, this method was something he had obtained from a secret place in the ruins. Ordinary people would not know about it. As long as Feng Yuan was careful, no one should be able to discover him. All right. Feng Yuan's gaze was ruthless. Looking in the direction of Great Yong's holy capital's main gate, she put on her veiled hat and cloak again. With a leap, she rushed forward. From now on, she was going to be reborn and be reborn. Evil Dr. Gui Tong, you didn't expect this, did you? Not only did you fail to kill me in the Saint Monarch's tomb, but you also died. Now that the Sage Monarch's tomb has collapsed, you have absolutely no chance of surviving. Henceforth, in the entire Sky Spill continent, no one will be able to compete with me. Don't worry, after you leave, I will send everyone related to you to see you. Just you wait. Feng Yuan's eyes flashed with a sinister light as he thought. In the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared into the city gates of Great Yong's holy capital. 3 days later, a shocking change occurred in Great Yong. All of the descendants of Great Yong's imperial family, including the Sage Emperor and that saint of Great Yong, had died in an instant due to the sudden accident. Great Yong's golden dragon wailed. Above the holy dynasty's ancestral shrine, dark clouds covered the sky. Chapter 1577. Great Yong Imperial Palace, Golden Hall. Feng Yuan was dressed in a luxurious and newly tailored dragon robe, sitting upright on the dragon throne at the head of the hall. Her face was hidden under a veil, and her eyes were cold as she looked down at the officials below. She coldly said, "Immediately send orders to the 4 directions and mobilize the army. At the same time, issue letters of credence to the Empire of Qin and Great Chu. This empress suspects that Luo Qingtong is related to the sudden deaths of the imperial family. Have the 2 empires hand over Luo Qingtong and those related to her. Otherwise, send troops to the Empire of Qin and Great Chu." Feng Yuan's eyes were sinister. With the death of the evil physician Gui Tong, Luo Qingtong and the Luo family no longer had anyone to rely on. She wanted to kill them all, and let the evil physician Gui Tong know of this in the underworld. Only then could she dispel the hatred in her heart. Feng Wuan thought, clenching her teeth. The aura around her surged, clearly surpassing the sage realm. After Feng Wuan returned to Great Yong, her aura had actually completely recovered. Not only that, but she had also broken through the sage realm, reaching a cultivation that surpassed the sage realm. All of this was because of the method taught to her by that wisp of green smoke. Feng Wuan had sacrificed a group of people from Great Yong's imperial family. Only by using the bloodline and soul power of her closest kin to reforge her strength did she manage to suppress the strange power in her wound. But even so, there was no way for her to recover her looks. For the rest of her life, she could only wear a veil or a mask made of human skin. Thinking of this, Feng Wuan's hatred grew. She hated that she could not immediately capture Luo Qingtong and the others and torture them to death to vent the resentment in her heart. Yes. Below the hall, none of the officials dared to make a single sound of objection. Everyone knew that Feng Wuan's strength was of unknown origin, and his ascension to the throne was also very strange. But no one dared to say anything. Those who had stood up for the other members of Great Yong's imperial family and questioned Feng Wuan's ability to kill his own relatives to seize the throne had already been imprisoned and executed with 1,000 cuts. All the ministers went to watch the ceremony, but facing Feng Wuan's order, they all kept quiet out of fear, only daring to say, yes, in a trembling voice. On the same day, the news and letter of credence spread to Great Yong. In an instant, the eastern region was shaken. The 4 dynasties were shaken. The Great Chu's sacred dynasty, the Great Chu Palace. Bang! The door of a remote courtyard was suddenly pushed open. Empress Dowager Yan Shi, dressed in the court robes of the Empress Dowager, looked majestic and imposing as she strode in with her entourage. "Where are you going?" "Taya." As her voice rang out. In an instant, a certain figure who was riding on the wall and was about to sneak away froze. Yan Shi. Old Master Luo looked at Empress Dowager Yan Shi, who was walking straight over. He immediately gritted his teeth and said ruthlessly, "Let me go. Great Yong's men are about to attack. In fact, I have never loved you. Before, I wanted to be with you again because I coveted the power and status of the Great Chu's sacred dynasty. Now that Great Yong's men want to catch me, of course I have to escape. I advise you to let me go quickly. This way, both of us can have a way to live, otherwise." "Otherwise what?" Empress Dowager Yan Shi looked at him with a sneer and said, "Luo Tong, you've grown bold. You even dare to lie to me. Escape. I think you're going to die, right?" Chapter 1578. Get the hell down here. I don't need you to protect Great Chu for me. This man left so quietly because he didn't want to embarrass her, nor did he want to implicate Great Chu. However, she had worked hard for Great Chu all her life, and she was worthy of the late emperor and Great Chu. This time, she wanted to be willful. This man, she would never allow him to leave. She would not allow him to go out and die for her and Great Chu. No. After Empress Dowager Yan Shi finished speaking, Old Master Luo immediately cried out. He didn't want to implicate Yan Shi and Great Chu, so he wanted to leave. How could he stay any longer? But soon, he found that he had spilled the beans, and hurriedly corrected himself. "Humph. Yan Shi, you vicious woman, don't try to trick me into staying to die. I must go. And you, don't pester me so shamelessly. I already said that I don't love you. Those words I said before were all to coax you." Before he finished speaking, Empress Dowager Yan Shi's sneering voice sounded. "Is that so? Even after you drugged me this morning, you cried in my ear and said those mushy words of farewell. Were they all fake? Do you want me to repeat your mushy words of love here one by one? Bang! As soon as Empress Dowager Yan Shi's words sounded, old Master Luo fell from the wall in an instant. What? You heard all of it. Old Master Luo's handsome face was red, he was simply too ashamed to see anyone. The words of love he said to Empress Dowager Yan Shi were mushy to the point of breaking through the sky. He had never said such mushy and disgusting words in his life, and she actually heard all of it. Weren't you drugged by me? Old Master Luo's face turned red for a while, he couldn't believe this fact. What he used was the bewitching medicine given by Tong Tong. How could it not work? Empress Dowager Yan Shi sneered. Don't I have an antidote for the medicine Tong Tong gave you? This stupid man. Empress Dowager Yan Shi didn't want to talk to him anymore, she just waved her sleeve. Come, help Empress Dowager up and go to the Golden Hall. This time, she was going to be completely willful. As for this man, she would settle the score with him after this matter. If it couldn't be settled, then they would settle this score in the underworld. Anyway, in this life, she would never let him go. Swish! Empress Dowager Yan Shi waved her sleeves and strode towards the Golden Palace with a group of internal guards and attendants. There, a group of courtiers of the Great Chu Court were waiting. Boz! Above the great golden hall of the Great Chu Sacred A group of the court dowagers. Empress Dowager, Empress. Her expression was cold and dignified, and her bearing was gentle and beautiful without losing any of her lofty stature. She was dressed in an extraordinarily luxurious court robe of the Empress Dowager. As her sleeves danced, she seemed to have the demeanor of someone who was above the clouds. She walked up step by step. Old Master Luo was escorted behind her by a group of guards and was finally forced to sit beside her. Old Master Luo was a little anxious and wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by Empress Dowager Yan Shi. The latter didn't look at him, she only scanned the hall with a pair of sharp eyes. Chapter 1579. Translations. In the past 40 years, I've never slacked off. Everything I did was for Great Chu. I'm willing to exchange my life for Great Chu's peace. But this time, I want to be willful. I don't agree to Great Yong's request. Do you have any objections? Empress Dowager Yan Shi's words were powerful. She had devoted her life to Great Chu and was willing to sacrifice her life to protect Great Chu. But Luo Tong couldn't. Her granddaughter couldn't either. If Great Yong wanted to touch them, they would have to step over her dead body first. We have no objections. As Empress Dowager Yan Shi's voice sounded, all the officials in the Golden Hall were stunned for a moment before they all prostrated themselves on the ground, expressing their willingness to support Empress Dowager Yan Shi's decision. Especially the old officials who supported the young emperor with Empress Dowager Yan Shi. They naturally knew how much Empress Dowager Yan Shi had racked her brains for Great Chu. Without the Empress Dowager, there would be no Great Chu today. Now that the Empress Dowager had issued an edict, they would naturally support her willfulness. Moreover, the Luo family and Luo Qintong had been kind to them. They had to repay this kindness. We are willing to obey the Empress Dowager's order. Good. Empress Dowager Yan Shi suddenly stood up, her sharp eyes piercing through the hall, towards the border between Great Chu and Great Yong. Deploy the troops. Prepare to fight Great Yong. When Empress Dowager Yan Shi gave the order, Great Yong's letter of credence had arrived in the Golden Hall of the Empire of Qin. Looking at the vermilion handwriting on the letter, the officials of the Empire of Qin were all arguing. Some were in favor of handing over Luo Qintong and all the people related to her, so as to avoid a war with Great Yong and damage the country's strength. After all, Great Yong had stated in the letter of credence. As long as Luo Qingtong and the others were handed over, Great Yong would also compensate and apologize for attacking the Empire of Qin. Under such circumstances, wasn't it better than going to war with Great Yong? But Grand Tutor Jiang and the others opposed it. At this moment, the door of the hall was opened with a bang. A figure that was brimming with vitality and vast power strode into the hall. I want to protect Luo Qingtong. As this steady and clear voice rang out, the surrounding noisy voices were instantly startled. Grand Tutor Jiang and the others turned around in surprise. Your Highness! Your Highness! All the courtiers knelt down. Logically speaking, in front of the sage emperor of the Empire of Qin in the Golden Palace of the Holy Dynasty, Ma Chenyi, even if he was the crown prince, could not make his ministers kneel in front of the sage emperor. However, the current Ma Chenyi was no longer the Ma Chenyi of the past. The young man was dressed in an elegant green robe. He was calm and elegant, and the aura around him was domineering. The aura that surrounded him seemed to take the shape of an azure dragon. It seemed to be roaring at the heavens as it let out a soft cry. Ma Chenyi walked in step by step. The dragon aura around him seemed to resonate with the entire Golden Palace. Saint Realm. Dragon Transformation. Grand Tutor Jiang and the others were pleasantly surprised. The scene that Ma Chenyi was experiencing had never appeared in the royal family of the Empire of Qin. The Empire of Qin's royal family inherited the power of the true dragon. It was rumored that the ancestor of the Empire of Qin's royal family had a brief love affair with a woman who had transformed into a true dragon. Since then, the power of the true dragon had been passed down in the royal bloodline. Every generation of the royal family of the Empire of Qin would awaken the bloodline aura that carried the power of the true dragon. Chapter 1580. Translator, Atlas Studios. However, no one expected that the power of the true dragon in his body would be so dense that his aura could transform into that of a dragon. This meant that Ma Chenyi's power of the true dragon was so strong that he might be able to cultivate the body of a true dragon one day. Under such circumstances, everyone naturally had to bow down and worship him. I, as the heir to the throne of the Empire of Qin, the descendant of the true dragon, decide to protect Luo Qingtong and the others. We will fight Great Yong. Ma Chenyi's words left no room for refutation. With the richness of the dragon's aura in his body and the might of breaking through to the Saint Realm, even the sage emperor of the Empire of Qin couldn't refute his words. After all, in the history of the Empire of Qin, there was only one suspected to be a true dragon. We will do as the Crown Prince says. The sage emperor of the Empire of Qin said in a deep voice, reply to Great Yong. The Empire of Qin will not hand over anyone related to Luo Qingtong. If they want to fight, then let's fight. Yes, Your Majesty. The minister who received the order quickly walked out. However, Ma Chenyi's heart didn't relax. He furrowed his beautiful eyebrows and looked worriedly in the direction of the far west wilderness. He knew that Luo Qingtong was the evil Dr. Ghost Eyes. Great Yong made such a big move, but why didn't the other side and the Black Field react? Did something really happen to Luo Qingtong? The Grand Principal of the Sacred Academy of the Empire of Qin was also worried. This child of the evil doctor. She didn't want to go at first, but she insisted. Is this good? Did something happen? My little sweetheart. The Grand Principal paced back and forth in the principal's office, occasionally clutching his chest and crying out in pain. Luo Qingtong was the trump card and junior that he had high hopes for. Now, something had happened. The Grand Supreme Dean beat his feet and stomped his chest. He hated himself for not trying to stop Luo Qingtong earlier. Yet, he had to succumb to her tyranny and approve her leave. Are you all right now? Did something happen? The Dean of the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin couldn't stand it anymore. He hurriedly said, Master, you can't keep pacing here like this. It's better to hurry to His Excellency Ming Zun and let him see how Luo Qingtong is doing. The dean of the Sacred Academy of the Empire of Qin said. Actually, he still didn't quite believe that something had happened to Luo Qingtong. Considering how much that person cared about the young girl. If something were to happen to Luo Qingtong, then the entire eastern domain, no, the entire Sky Spill continent would be swallowed up by the wrath of that lord, destroyed. How could Great Yong be arrogant? However, just as he finished speaking, the Grand Supreme Dean's pacing movement instantly stopped. Then, he looked at him and suddenly let out a long sigh. AI. Do you think I haven't contacted Underworld Sovereign? Ever since I learned of Great Yong's revolt, I've sent over a dozen messages over 1,000 li. Asking about Luo Qingtong. However, as he said this, he sighed and shook his head. None of them responded. All of them were like stones sinking into the sea. The Grand Supreme Dean's expression was dignified. He also didn't want to believe that something had happened to Luo Qingtong. However, Yi Qianxian cared about Luo Qingtong so much that he was willing to come to the Empire of Qin to be an instructor. How could he turn a blind eye to Luo Qingtong's matter? There was only one possibility, and that was, something had really happened to Luo Qingtong. And Underworld Sovereign was looking for her. That was why their communication was cut off. What? Chapter 1581. The Dean of the Empire of Qin's Sacred Academy paled. Those who had not reached their level would not understand how terrifying Yi Qianxian's strength was. If something really happened to Luo Qingtong, then the consequences would be, sigh, let's do our best and leave the rest to fate. The Grand Supreme Dean sighed and shook his head. He did not expect to be able to stop Yi Qianxian's anger. In fact, he was also depressed about Luo Qingtong's accident. The Empress of Great Yong, Feng Wan. The Grand Supreme Dean gnashed his teeth. Luo Qingtong's accident was definitely related to her. The Four Academies conference is about to begin. At that time, I don't care if you are the Empress of Great Yong or not. I will beat you up first. She dared to attack his student. The Grand Supreme Dean's protective and unscrupulous character acted up again. Not to mention that Luo Qingtong was his most promising junior and student, even if she wasn't, he quite liked that little girl's evil and domineering character. Not to mention that Luo Qingtong said that she would treat his injury. The Grand Supreme Dean had been looking forward to this for a long time. Now that his student was in trouble, there was no way to treat her injury. How could he let Feng Wan off so easily? Humph. Let those little fellows in the academy pack up their things. We are going to the Sacred Academy of Great Qi. In this year's Four Academies Grand Gathering, I must beat down all those people from Great Yong. Tell them to beat them to death. There is no need to show mercy. Especially that Feng Wan. Let Ma Chenyi beat them to death. The Grand Supreme Dean said angrily. The Four Academies Conference did not care about your identity. Everything was based on strength. The Dean of the Empire of Qin's Sacred Academy responded and went to prepare. In the Great Yong Sacred Dynasty, Feng Wan was inspecting the students of the Great Yong Sacred Academy below. These people were all outstanding talents of the Great Yong Sacred Academy. Moreover, it was someone she had chosen. Feng Wan taught these people the forbidden evil technique that Qin Yan had taught him. He watched as they sacrificed their loved ones to gain strength. Each and every one of them increased their strength to an extremely powerful level. He nodded in satisfaction. Very good. During the Four Academy Conference, she was going to kill all the geniuses of the other three sacred academies. A bloodbath at the Four Academies Assembly. From now on, Great Yong would reign supreme in the eastern region. Especially those from the Empire of Qin and Great Chu. Feng Wan sneered. Thinking back to the replies he had received regarding the two dynasties, they didn't even hand over a single person. Good. Very good. At that time, she would surely torture and kill all the genius experts of the two dynasties. Let's see how long they can protect Luo Qingtong and the people related to her. Especially Luo Qingtong. If she makes an appearance during the 4 Academy meeting, then I'll definitely make her beg for death. Feng Wuan's eyes were ruthless. He then ordered coldly, everyone, set out for the sacred capital of Great Qi. In addition, send troops to the two dynasties. She wanted everyone to regret going against her. Yes. The students of the Great Yong Sacred Academy answered in unison. A minister standing beside Feng Wuan also left. The entire Great Yong Sacred Dynasty was under Feng Wuan's control, and the Great Yong Sacred Academy was no exception. Under her command, the entire Great Yong Sacred Dynasty's war machine was activated. The Great Chu Sacred Dynasty, which was next to the Great Yong Sacred Dynasty, bore the brunt of the Great Yong Sacred Dynasty's attack. Rumble. The Great Yong Sacred Dynasty's army marched toward the Great Chu Sacred Dynasty's border. Chapter 1582. Translations. Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian had been staying at the bottom. They didn't know how Yi Qianxian found this place. The spiritual energy inside was abnormally rich. Luo Qingtong later discovered that the water and rocks were not ordinary water and rocks. These rocks were abnormally hard. Because they had been immersed in these spiritual energies for a long time. Both the water and the stones contained a dense amount of spiritual energy. And these spiritual energies were all purified and could be directly absorbed by warriors for cultivation. Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian stayed at the bottom for a long time to consolidate their strength. This was because the speed of her strength improvement was too fast. Although before the Saint Realm, she was enlightened by the power of the Saint King Realm powerhouse and then took the Saint Realm flower to advance to the Saint Realm. These two methods didn't have any hidden dangers and didn't spoil things through excessive enthusiasm. But because her strength improved too fast, her foundation was inevitably a little shaky. Especially in the Saint Realm, Luo Qingtong's understanding was far from solid. Originally, she was going to leave the secret chamber of the Saint King tomb and meet up with Su Yu and the others, then go back and consolidate for a period of time. But she didn't expect Su Yu and the others to be captured by the people of the beast-taming King Valley, and then Yi Qianxian came again. With such a strong and bottomless man by her side to guide her, Luo Qingtong naturally didn't worry about her strength not being stable enough. While absorbing the spiritual energy at the bottom of the cliff, she comprehended and consolidated her strength under Yi Qianxian's guidance. Soon, her aura stabilized at the peak of the Saint Realm, close to the level beyond the Saint Realm. Her aura was so strong and solid that she only needed to wait for the next opportunity to break through and perfectly advance to the level beyond the Saint Realm without leaving a trace of hidden dangers. The improved version of Annihilation in Luo Qingtong's hand was also becoming more and more perfect after a few days of practice. Boom! Luo Qingtong blasted out the sword in her hand. In an instant, the water in the entire spirit pool began to decrease at an extremely fast speed. And the white light from Luo Qingtong's hand also became more and more intense. Then, with a boom, it heavily blasted into the bottom of the pool in an extremely violent and powerful state, splashing a wide curtain of water more than 10 feet high. The power of annihilation in Luo Qingtong's hands was more than twice as powerful as when she first learned how to use it. Boom, boom, boom. The water in the water curtain fell from mid-air, forming a violent scene in the deep pool like the impact of a waterfall. All right. Looking at this scene, Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She raised her hand and put away the life and death yin and yang sword. She looked at the man beside her and said, "Qianren, shall we go?" They had been here for a while and didn't know the situation in Wild City. But with Su Yu and Yan Yang taking care of things, Luo Qingtong was still assured. She was going to take a look at Wild City. If there were no problems, she was ready to leave. After all, the time for the grand meeting of the 4 academies was approaching. Luo Qingtong had to rush back to the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin, so as to avoid the Grand Dean nagging her again. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched as she thought of this. Yes. Chapter 1583. In Desolate City, Bei Qing and Feng Yu's expressions were grave. How is it? Still can't sense the traces of Master and the evil doctor? Bei Qing paced back and forth in the room irritably. They had already received the news from the Black Field. There was a great change in the eastern region. Great Yong had sent troops to Great Chu and the Empire of Qin just to find trouble with Luo Qingtong and the people related to her. They wanted to report this to their master immediately. However, they didn't know where he and the evil doctor went. They took turns to sense Yi Qianqian's breath every day. They sensed that their strength was about to collapse, but there was still no news of Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianqian. They were so anxious that they were about to explode. No. Feng Yu's voice was serious. He had just finished a round of sensing. Yi Qianqian's strength was very strong. Even if their strength and cultivation methods were taught by him, they could sense Yi Qianqian's existence with special methods. However, there were some special areas that they couldn't sense. Yi Qianqian should be in such a place with Luo Qingtong. This was troublesome. Feng Yu's face was serious. If Master and the evil doctor stayed in that place and didn't come out, as he was thinking, his eyes suddenly focused. Master! His figure flashed out in an instant. Master's breath had appeared. Bei Qing hurriedly followed. Swish! Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianqian just appeared outside the cliff and the deep pool. They were about to leave. At this moment, the air was distorted. In an instant, Bei Qing and Feng Yu's figures appeared. Master, the evil doctor. Their voices were urgent. They knelt on the ground as soon as they appeared and reported, something happened in the eastern region. Everyone in the Yong royal family died suddenly. Feng Yuan went back to inherit the throne. Now he sent troops to Great Chu and the Empire of Qin to ask them to hand over all the people related to the evil doctor's original identity. The army has already set out for Great Chu. What? Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly. Feng Yuan. He didn't die. He went back to inherit the throne of Great Yong. Now he attacked grandfather and others. Thinking of Master Luo and Empress Dowager Yan Shi in the Chu's sacred dynasty, Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. The blood-red light inside exploded in an instant. Viciousness and killing intent suddenly rose from the depths of her eyes. Feng Yuan, you're courting death. Luo Qingtong's figure flashed out in an instant, heading towards the east region. Master. Bei Qing and Feng Yu raised their heads and looked at Yi Qianren. The latter's eyes were also cold. It was not because of Feng Yuan but because of Luo Qingtong. This woman. Yi Qianxian looked down at his suddenly empty arms. The veins on his forehead suddenly throbbed. Couldn't she rely on him more? She left just like that. Yi Qianxian gritted his teeth. Order the 18 cities of the Black Field to send troops. He said coldly. They dared to attack Luo Qingtong. He wanted there to be no more Great Yong in this world after today. Yi Qianxian raised his hand and threw out a Black Field token. It was his supreme token in the Black Field. He was the only one who could use this token. With this token, he could use the power of the Black Field at will. Bei Qing and Feng Yu were anxious because without Yi Qianqian's command and token, even if they knew that Great Chu was in danger, they couldn't mobilize the power of the Black Field to help. Yes. Chapter 1584. And Luo Qingtong, after rushing forward for a long distance, suddenly remembered that she had forgotten Yi Qianxian. Oh my! Thinking of Yi Qianxian's proud temperament, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched fiercely in an instant. Forget it. She raised her hand to support her forehead. After this matter was over, she would coax him well. Thinking of the man's cold face and awkward angry appearance, Luo Qingtong's eyes showed a trace of a smile. But soon, this trace of a smile solidified into coldness in her eyes again. Feng Wan. Luo Qingtong sneered and looked in the direction of the Great Chu and the Empire of Qin in the eastern region, and the aura around her fluctuated more violently. Swish! She raised her hand and released the earth-level spiritual ship from her waist ring, and her figure flashed and swept up. Buzz! Luo Qingtong raised her hand and slapped the earth-level spiritual ship. In an instant, the acceleration inscription patterns that Luo Qingtong had previously drawn on its body lit up one by one. Then, the spiritual ship, like a flash of lightning, rushed toward the eastern region. Eastern region. At the border of the Great Chu Sacred Dynasty and the Great Yong Sacred Dynasty, the important town of Yen City. Empress Dowager Yen. She was dressed in military attire. She was dignified and capable, and there was a towering beauty in her gentleness. She stood on the fortified city wall that was dozens of feet high, and her eyes were fixed on the clouds of dust raised by the army rushing in the distance. Luo Tong. Empress Dowager Yen. She's voice was heavy. I have received great kindness from the late Emperor of the Great Chu. This mobilization of troops is the only time in my life that I will be willful. But, she suddenly turned her head and looked deeply at old Master Luo beside her. I can only be willful this time. The people of the Great Chu can't be in an abyss of suffering because of me, and they can't be homeless because of me. As she spoke, she straightened her body and raised her head slightly to look at the resolute and cold man in front of her. After more than 40 years, he still looked the same as when she first met him. This was good. She had no regrets. Empress Dowager Yen. She's gaze was deep. She said in a low voice, "It'll be fine if Great Chu wins this battle. If you lose, then you and I will go to the Yellow Springs together in this strategic border city of Great Chu." She would not release this man, nor would she hand him over to Great Yong. He let Feng Wan, who obviously hated him, torture him. But she could not let the entire Great Chu sacred dynasty die because of her selfishness. Therefore, if they could keep the enemy out of the border in this battle, then they would live. If not, Great Yong's army would knock on the gates of Great Chu's strategic border towns. Then, the imperial edict she left in her palace and the imperial edict of the late emperor that she asked to leave the palace could be put to good use. She would die with him as the old madam of the Luo family and the wife of Marquis Zhenggue. From then on, they would follow each other in life and death. The only thing that worried Empress Dowager Yen Shi more was Luo Qingtong. But her granddaughter was in the Empire of Qin's sacred dynasty. And in the sacred dynasty of the Empire of Qin, the true dragon crown prince of the Empire of Qin was said to have stood his ground against all opinions and wanted to protect Luo Qingtong. The response letter arrived at Great Yong almost at the same time as Great Chu. In this way, Empress Dowager Yen Shi was completely relieved. The Empire of Qin was much stronger than Great Chu. Chapter 1585. If he said he wanted to protect his granddaughter, then Qingtong would definitely be safe and sound. When the four academies' grand meeting was held, with Qingtong's strength and potential, she should be able to stand out from all the disciples of the Sacred Academy. At that time, if she was chosen by the sects in the hidden world, even Great Yong couldn't do anything to her. Empress Dowager Yen Shi thought and felt that she had nothing else to worry about. But she didn't know that Luo Qingtong was the evil Dr. Ghost Eye. If she knew, she wouldn't be worried about these things. However, old Master Luo wanted to tell her before, but he was too busy to do so. Now, there was no need to say anything. Old Master Luo knew that if Luo Qingtong was here and knew that Great Chu was in such a crisis, she would definitely not sit idly by. But now, she and Blackfield didn't do anything. It only meant that something had happened to her. And was Great Yong so arrogant because something had happened to his granddaughter? Old Master Luo's eyes were filled with tears. He looked at Empress Dowager Yan Shi in front of him. This woman had always been resolute and decisive. He didn't want to make things difficult for her before, so he wanted to leave. Now that something had happened to his granddaughter, he only wanted her to be well. At the same time, he knew how much she valued Great Chu. But she was unwilling. For him, she went against her original promise. The only time she was willful was to protect him. Old Master Luo knew how difficult it was for Empress Dowager Yan Shi to do this. Okay. He hugged the woman in front of him with a trembling voice. If we lose, we will go to the Yellow Springs together. He had missed half of her life. This time, he wouldn't miss it again, right? Old Master Luo originally thought that if he lost, he would knock Empress Dowager Yan Shi out and let the guards take her away. He would voluntarily walk out and let Great Yong's people take him away. He and Yan Shi kept their previous matter a secret very well. Except for themselves, no one knew that Yan Shi was his former wife. The world thought that he had become the Empress Dowager and was with Yan Shi because he had contributed to Great Chu. After he was taken away by Great Yong's people, Yan Shi could still be the Empress Dowager of Great Chu, honorable and noble. But now, Old Master Luo changed his mind. Since this woman wanted to die with him, then so be it. It was better to die together than to live alone. It would also save her the trouble of not being able to find him when she looked for him again. Yes. Empress Dowager Yan Shi grabbed his sleeve tightly. Right at this moment, boom boom boom. The sound of an approaching army could be heard from the front. Great Yong's vanguard had already arrived. Great Yong's banners fluttered in the wind. Large batches of Great Yong's soldiers flooded in from all directions towards the strategic town of Ku City. Soon, they had completely surrounded the strategic town of Hingqing from all directions. Violent and ferocious auras converged and soared into the sky in an instant. Empress Dowager Yan Shi's eyes were sharp. She turned her head abruptly, staring at the rows of soldiers as she coldly waved her hand and said, "Soldiers of Great Chu, raise the flag." As Empress Dowager Yan Shi's voice sounded, in an instant, the flag of the Great Chu rose above the strategic town of Yan City. Flying Phoenix Flag. Empress Dowager Yan Shi is here. A few voices faintly came from the Great Yong army. Then, someone looked up to the sky and laughed. Ha! I didn't expect that Empress Dowager Yan Shi of Great Chu, who has been iron-blooded all her life, couldn't pass the test of a beautiful man. For a marquis from a small inferior country of the Empire of Qin, she is actually willing to personally lead an army to the border. Chapter 1586. As the voice rang out, in an instant, a figure suddenly shot up from the Great Yong Army's square formation and appeared in front of everyone. Surpassing the Saint Realm. Seeing this figure appear, the eyes of Empress Dowager Yan Shi and the others instantly froze. Not for anything else, but for a general, the peak of the Saint Realm was already the limit. In the four great sacred dynasties, surpassing the Saint Realm was already at the level of the Guardian Realm. After all, other than the Saint Realm experts who were their final trump cards and rarely used, surpassing the Saint Realm was already the highest level of combat power that the sacred dynasties could use. What was surpassing the Saint Realm? For example, Grand Tutor Jiang of the Empire of Qin was an old minister of 3 dynasties and an important minister who had almost all the power in the court. His strength was surpassing the Saint Realm. Another example was the Grand Principal, who controlled the Sacred Academy of the Empire and had countless talented disciples in the sacred dynasties as his students. He was only surpassing the Saint Realm. Then there was the Grand Marshal of the Empire of Qin, Meng Bai, who controlled all the armies in the world, who was only surpassing the Saint Realm. Experts surpassing the Saint Realm were also very few in the four great sacred dynasties. Everyone in the world knew about them, and all of them were in high positions. But now, this person who was obviously a general of Great Yong's vanguard had also surpassed the Saint Realm. How was this possible? When did Great Yong's national strength become so powerful? Saint Realm was rare, and surpassing the Saint Realm was even rarer. How could they casually cultivate experts surpassing the Saint Realm? If that was the case, why did they use such a shameless and dirty method to seize the throne of Great Chu? Even in the Empire of Qin's sacred dynasty, they used a scheme to murder the true dragon crown prince of the Empire of Qin. Empress Dowager Yan Shi and the others had grave expressions. What caused their hearts to sink even more was that as this person's voice rang out, a series of long laughter rang out one after another. Great Chu's Empress Dowager Yan Shi is naturally unusual. She doesn't even like our Great Yong's seventh prince, but as the Empress Dowager, she was willing to marry the Marquis of a small country and lead troops to the border for him. What's the big deal? Haha. Perhaps, that person's martial arts are better. Following these provocative, cold, and mocking voices, one figure after another suddenly emerged from Great Yong's phalanx, appearing at the side of the general who had just spoken. Saint Realm, Saint Realm. Surpassing the Saint Realm. Another expert who had surpassed the Saint Realm. No, there was more than one. Empress Dowager Yan Shi looked at the row of generals in front of her, especially the three experts who had surpassed the Saint Realm. Her heart instantly sank. The Yong's army's strength of Great Chu. Three experts surpassing the Saint Realm and dozens of the Saint Realm. The overall strength of this vanguard army was almost as strong as the entire army of Great Chu. What instant dowagers Yong's? Yong Great Yong's Imperial Yong's Yong. Yong Emperor S Yong, Emioff Yen Yong. Could it be that all of this was related to him? No wonder they dared to attack both Great Chu and Great Qin. With Great Yong's strength, they indeed had the capital to wage war against them at the same time. Empress Dowager Yan Shi, who had originally hoped that Feng Yuan would be afraid of the alliance of the two empires and retreat after putting on a show, felt her heart turn cold. As for Great Chu's generals, seeing the strength of Great Yong's generals in front of them, their hearts couldn't help but sink and feel shocked. Chapter 1587. Unless they gathered all the troops of Great Chu here, they might be able to resist the other side. But then, there would be no more soldiers in Great Chu that could be controlled. If the insides of the entire Great Chu dynasty were to be torn open, then any surprise attack from any of the troops could possibly overturn the entire Great Chu's sacred dynasty and destroy the dynasty's throne. With the Empress Dowager's temperament, she would never do such a thing. It was even more impossible for her to put the dynasty in danger. Therefore, they were most likely going to lose this battle. Empress Dowager. A group of people looked at the woman in military uniform standing on the city wall in front of them with sorrowful eyes. They were all Empress Dowager Yan Shi's confidants. Naturally, they knew that she was prepared to die before she came. It would be fine if they could win this battle, but if not, the Empress Dowager, thinking of the imperial edict sealed in a brocade box in front of them when Empress Dowager Yan Shi was in the palace, and the posthumous edict left by the late emperor that said she could leave the palace at will, and one more, if she died, she would be buried with Empress Dowager Yan in the Luo family as the old lady of the Luo family. She would not be buried in the imperial mausoleum. Everyone could not help but feel sad. Empress Dowager. Everyone's voice was sorrowful. Empress Dowager Yan Shi's face was very calm. She looked at the Yong army in front of her indifferently. After seeing the strength of the generals at first, she quickly recovered her previous determination. No matter what the final result was, she would not change her initial decision. She and Luo Tong would accompany each other in life and in death. These people of Great Yong could not scare her. And she, who had arranged all the things after her death, was not afraid of any threat. I would rather marry a marquis of a small country than the 7th prince of your Great Yong sacred dynasty. It seems that you are very proud of it. You can't even compare to a small inferior country. Where did your Great Yong sacred dynasty get the face to mock me here? Empress Dowager Yan Shi's voice was cold. She raised her hand and grasped the Luo lad, whose face was flushed with anger from the mockery and humiliation. He was about to rush out and kill his way out. She returned all of the mockery that the Great Yong generals had directed at her, saying that she was willing to be cheap. Sorry, even if she was willing to be cheap, she would not like your Great Yong sacred dynasty. I wonder who is more despicable than who. As soon as these words were spoken, the faces of those Great Yong generals, who had just mocked Empress Dowager Yan Shi and felt that their faces had grown greatly, abruptly changed. Humph. Empress Dowager Yan Shi had a sharp tongue. I wonder if you'll still be so sharp-tongued when you've become our prisoner. A Great Yong general who had surpassed the Saint Realm sneered. Great Chu's Empress Dowager Yanshi had actually personally come to the border. This was great. Once they broke into the city and captured Old Master Luo, they would also be able to control her. In this way, Great Chu would be able to obtain it easily. After all, Empress Dowager Yanshi was in their hands. How could the people of Great Chu ignore her safety? At that time, wouldn't they have no choice but to surrender? At that time, he would use one army to subdue an entire dynasty and force the Great Chu to submit. His future was limitless. At that time, surpassing the Saint Realm might not be the end of his strength. The Great Chu general thought as he looked at Empress Dowager Yan Shi with eyes full of greed and coldness. Attack! Break through the city! He raised his hand and waved it. Chapter 1588. Boom. 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 The armies on the left, middle, and right flanks of the Great Yong army were closing in on the isolated city they had surrounded. Empress Dowager Yan Shi's eyes were ice-cold as she watched the black clouds of Great Yong's army swarming towards her. Prepare to defend against the enemy. As she raised her hand, the sounds of weapons being unsheathed rang out from all around her. At the same time, waves of aura surged into the sky like smoke and clouds. Boom! The first batch of Great Yong soldiers to arrive at the city walls launched an attack. In an instant, the entire world seemed to tremble in this war. In a place near the eastern region of the western wilderness, a streak of black light streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning. Before anyone could discover what was going on, it had already disappeared into the distant horizon. Are you going to go back like this? In the spirit ship, Little Pig had already come out of the 9-story exquisite pagoda and looked at Luo Qingtong. Its pair of small eyes looked left and right, but it didn't see Yi Qianming as it expected. This woman. She can't be thinking of going back alone, right? You can't kill so many people alone. Little Pig looked at Luo Qingtong with a headache. He was afraid that she would have such a crazy idea. Of course not. Luo Qingtong glanced at him. How could she be so stupid? Then you want to, Little Pig was about to ask her what she wanted to do when he heard Luo Qingtong's voice. We're here. Aw. We're here. How did you get here? Little Pig looked at the faintly discernible scene in front of him and his small eyes widened. This isn't the border between Great Chu and the western wilderness. Isn't Luo Qingtong going back to Great Chu? How did she get here? Little Pig's beady eyes scanned the eastern region before him for a long time before confirming that this was Great Yong's territory. How did this woman get here? Wasn't she going to reinforce Great Chu? what are you trying to do? Little Pig blinked his beady eyes and asked Luo Qingtong. His heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. Could it be that this woman wanted to launch a surprise attack on Great Yong's holy capital and force Great Yong's army to retreat? However, the people of Great Yong were not that stupid. They definitely did not dispatch all of their troops to attack Great Chu. Within Great Yong's holy capital, there was bound to be the tightest defenses and most valiant guards. If Luo Qingtong were to charge in alone, even if she had the blood pupil, she would still be surrounded and killed by a large number of soldiers. They might as well go and reinforce Great Chu directly. In any case, she was going to reinforce Great Chu, and Great Chu's army was there to help her. If he were to go to Great Yong's holy capital, Little Pig didn't dare to imagine that scene. Most importantly, the grand meeting of the 4 academies was just around the corner. That woman, Feng Wan, might have already brought people from Great Yong's holy academy to participate in the grand meeting. She might not even be in Great Yong's holy capital. Even if Luo Qingtong went, she wouldn't be able to kill her. Thinking of this, Little Pig hastily said, "Wait. Master, calm down. You must stay calm. You can't go to Great Yong's holy capital. That's just courting death." Chapter 1589. Who told you that I'm going to Great Yong's holy capital? Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes cast a sidelong glance at Little Pig, who was hugging her thigh and refusing to let go. She lifted him up and flicked his nose. Who gave you such a foolish misconception? How could she not know what he knew? Ah. Aren't you going to Great Yong's holy capital? Then what are you doing here? Little Pig was dumbfounded. If Luo Qingtong wasn't going to Great Yong's holy capital, then why was she going to Great Yong's territory? Of course it's, Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. To give Great Yong's people a huge surprise. Following Luo Qingtong's words, an aura suddenly emerged in her mind with a boom. This aura was none other than the aura of the 9-layered exquisite pagoda. Boom! Unlike the aura of the beast-taming King's Valley contracted demonic beasts, Luo Qingtong drew out the aura of the 9-layered exquisite pagoda this time. This 9-layered exquisite pagoda was known as the demon-subduing pagoda. Apart from its aura being able to suppress demonic beasts, the aura of the pagoda's interior was extremely beneficial for raising the strength of demonic beasts. Using an example as an analogy, to demonic beasts, the aura of the 9-layered exquisite pagoda was not inferior to the immortal fine jade nectar. As soon as this aura leaked out, the demonic beasts in the countless mountains and wilderness at the edge of the far western wilderness instantly rioted as if they had smelled some peerless elixir. Boom, boom, boom. In the entire far western wilderness bordering Great Yong's territory, one violent aura after another rapidly erupted. Then, roar, roar, roar. Demonic beasts' roars resounded. They were weak, vast, heaven-shaking, ethereal, and tyrannical, all of them rang out at the same time. Then, all of these auras were like boiling water, rapidly rushing towards Luo Qingtong's location. The aura of berserk and thirst was exceptionally intense. Let's go. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly. After sensing that the auras of the demonic beasts rising from the far western wilderness were all attracted, she immediately raised her hand and fiercely slapped the spirit ship. In the blink of an eye, the spirit ship, which she had deliberately slowed down as it neared the border of the eastern domain, suddenly took off at an extremely fast speed. It rushed into the eastern domain and into Great Yong's territory. Roar! As Luo Qingtong drove the spirit boat, the flying ship flew into the east region. The demonic beasts at the border of the far west barren region that were attracted by the aura inside the 9-story exquisite pagoda roared and rushed out of their hiding places, chasing after Luo Qingtong. Boom, boom, boom. The entire border to Yong. Like a snake, yet not a snake. Like a flood dragon, yet not a flood dragon. A huge serpent with wings and 2 horns on its head appeared in midair. This was a sacred green flood dragon. It spread its wings and drew a huge circle in midair with a boom. It flew towards the spirit ship driven by Luo Qingtong. Shriek! A Luan bird with a flesh gold crown on its head and spread its wings like a rock. Its entire body was covered with long and gorgeous green feathers. Its tail and tail feathers flickered with a cold light like fine iron. It flapped its wings and dragged its long tail feathers as it appeared in midair. Chapter 1590. There were also all kinds of demonic beasts that rushed out from their hiding places. Then, they roared and chased after Luo Qingtong. Among them, there were dozens of sacred beasts. Among them, there was no lack of sacred beasts that had surpassed the Saint Realm, or even the Saint Realm. In fact, if Luo Qingtong hadn't released the aura of the 9-story exquisite pagoda when she reached the border of the western wilderness, she would have attracted even more sacred beasts. After all, the higher the level of the demonic beasts, the more they knew the benefits of the aura of the 9-story exquisite pagoda. They were almost crazy and rushed out from their habitats in the western wilderness without caring about anything. They didn't care that the human territory and the sacred dynasty were in front of them, which they were most afraid of and unwilling to set foot in. Boom! 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 Countless demonic beasts surged out from the borders of the western wilderness like a torrential flood. They gathered together and headed in the direction of the Great Yong's sacred dynasty. As for Luo Qingtong, after activating the Earth-level spirit ship to the maximum, she brought along this group of violent and ferocious demonic beasts. In an extremely valiant and unprecedented manner, they slaughtered their way from the border of the Great Yong sacred dynasty's western wilderness to the border between Great Yong and Great Chu. Ah! Wherever these demonic beasts passed, it was like a hurricane had landed and a huge wave crashed. All the cities, countries, villages, and towns in front of them were uprooted in an instant. Any military encampment was like a grain of sand in the vast ocean in front of this enormous and almost destructive beast tide. It was not even worth mentioning. In an instant, the entire Great Yong sacred dynasty was turned upside down. Those who are loyal will be spared. As Luo Qingtong's voice came from afar, the cities and commanderies all surrendered and knelt on the ground under the threat of this violent beast tide that was close to destroying the world. Qing City is willing to surrender. Tong City is willing to surrender. Gale City is willing to surrender. Chifeng City is willing to surrender. Voices filled with panic and fear rang out one after another. The city was in a state of chaos. Everyone trembled as they knelt down, swearing to the heavens and earth that they were willing to surrender and pledge their allegiance. Streams of mind energy gathered from the front. Luo Qingtong sensed it and steered the spirit boat to take a detour. The violent beast tide was also attracted away by her. When Luo Qingtong encountered those who did not believe her, she would directly fly over the city and allow the wild beast tide behind her to flatten the entire city. Boom boom boom. As Luo Qingtong led the massive demonic beast horde towards the border between Great Yong and Great Chu, Luo Qingtong rushed towards Great Yong's border. Within the main city of Great Yong's Black Field, one figure after another suddenly appeared. The entire Black Field's main city's energy was fully activated, and the teleportation array lit up continuously. All the experts from the 18 cities of the Black Field appeared in the main city of the Black Field. Sage Realm, Sage Realm, Sage Realm. It was still the Sage Realm. Looking at the aura of the experts who appeared one after another, many families, forces, and officials of the Great Yong sacred dynasty who resided in the main city of Great Yong's Black Field all looked at this scene in shock. What made them even more dumbfounded was what happened next. Swish swish swish. Chapter 1591. Bang! When someone saw this scene, he couldn't help but fall to the ground in shock. So many experts surpassing the Saint Realm. Seeing that dozens of experts surpassing the Saint Realm had gathered in such a short time, some people couldn't help but rub their eyes hard. How could this be? How could there be so many experts surpassing the Saint Realm? All the families and forces in Great Yong's Black Field were dumbfounded. They couldn't believe what was happening before their eyes. The Black Field's strength was actually so strong. The number of experts that had appeared was almost comparable to the high-end combat power of the four dynasties combined. It was laughable that the four great sacred dynasties had thought that the Black Field had signed a peace agreement with them because they were afraid of the alliance of the four dynasties. In fact, that wasn't the case at all. With the strength that the Black Field had just revealed, they could completely destroy the imperial families of the four dynasties and change the banner of the four great sacred dynasties. Everyone's faces were filled with shock. In particular, the families and officials of Great Yong were trembling like sifting chaff. They thought of the order that Feng Yuan had given to Luo Qingtong. However, didn't His Majesty say that the evil Dr. Ghosta was already dead, and that the Black Field's Ming Zun was too busy worrying about her and wouldn't have the time to care about Luo Qingtong? But now, this clearly wasn't the case. Everyone was trembling uncontrollably. Originally, when the teleportation array was activated, they wanted to find the city lord of Great Yong's Black Field to question him. But now, their momentum was reduced. At this moment, three figures appeared in the sky above the main city of Great Yong's dark region. My lord. The city lord of Great Yong's Black Field had been waiting for a long time. When he saw Yi Qianxian, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others appear, he immediately saluted. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent. He glanced at the city lord and didn't say anything. At this moment, Wind Feather asked, "Is everything ready?" "It's ready. Everyone is here." The mayor of Great Yong's Black Field hastily replied. "Master." Bei Qing and Feng Yu looked at Yi Qianxian. "Send out the troops." The man's words were concise and comprehensive. "Yes." Bei Qing and Feng Yu accepted the order and prepared to leave. However, at this time, Yi Qianning's words continued. "Great Yong's holy capital." "Great Yong's holy capital?" Bei Qing and Feng Yu looked surprised. "Master, aren't we going to the border to help the evil doctor?" "No need." Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent. After such a long time, he began to understand Luo Qingtong's way of doing things. Since she left alone and didn't return, she must have a way to deal with it. Moreover, even if he destroyed Great Yong first, he would still be able to rush to her aid in time. That woman was not someone who could not do anything without him. Since she had already gone to the border of Great Chu, he would go and destroy Great Yong first and completely eliminate this trouble for her. Thinking of this, Yi Qianxian's eyes turned cold. "Let's go." He turned around and flicked his sleeves. "Yes." Bei Qing and Feng Yu hurriedly followed. In an instant, a powerful and domineering aura rushed into the sky like meteors. They quickly spread out and swept in the direction of Great Yong's holy capital. Plop. After Yi Qianxian led the group of experts gathered by the 18 cities of the Black Field and left, someone finally couldn't take it anymore. His legs went soft, and he knelt on the ground in an indescribable sorry state. "It's over. Great Yong is finished." They stared blankly and kept saying. The Lord of Black Field had personally taken action. Chapter 1592. While everyone in Great Yong's Black Field was shocked, at the border between Great Chu and Great Yong, in the strategic city of Border City, the battle between Great Yong's army and Empress Dowager Yan Shi's group had reached its climax. Boom! 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 Wave after wave of attacks came from the Great Yong Sacred Dynasty's army below. All sorts of martial skills flew into the sky, bringing with them a vigorous and valiant aura. Then, they gathered together and formed an extremely vast attack. Like a sharp sword, it fiercely blasted toward the strategic city of Border City in front of them. Bang! After a loud noise, the huge defensive shield that covered the entire strategic city of Border City, which had been carefully strengthened, suddenly shook violently and shattered. The energy in the sky dissipated and impacted. In an instant, the entire strategic city of Border City was completely exposed to Great Yong's army. Ha ha ha! The defensive shield is broken. Bring the siege crossbows and blast open the gate of Border City. Seeing the huge defensive shield broken, Great Yong's generals laughed proudly. They looked at the strategic city of Border City in front of them with ferocious eyes and waved their hands fiercely. Immediately, the soldiers at the rear pushed out a huge ballista. Those siege crossbows were placed on wheeled carts. With a heavy creaking sound, they were pushed to the front of the battlefield. Seeing the appearance of these siege crossbows, Great Chu's soldiers' eyes suddenly focused. Then, on their faces, an expression of facing death unflinchingly appeared. Fire! Following Great Yong's order. In an instant, there was a burst of explosive sounds. The arrows of the siege crossbows were sharp and heavy, almost piercing the sky and shattering the void. They heavily blasted on the walls and gates of Border City. Bang! 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 A violent sound that almost shattered the entire city of Border City was heard. The entire strategic city of Border City, under such a dense and terrifying attack, the city walls and gates made of fine iron were all on the verge of collapsing. The moment the siege crossbows were fired, Old Master Luo rushed up and pushed Empress Dowager Yan Shi away from the city walls. Boom! 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 The entire strategic city of Border City was shaking violently. Screams sounded one after another. Many of Great Chu's soldiers could not dodge in time and were directly sent flying by the powerful and terrifying crossbow attacks. Some were even more miserable. They were directly hit by the crossbow bolts and instantly exploded into blood foam in the air. There were screams and wails all around. Old Master Luo's face was cold. He suddenly jumped up, looked at the siege crossbows, and shouted, "Where are the Luo family's disciples?" Here. As Old Master Luo's voice rang out, the disciples of the Luo clan appeared in front of him one by one. These people were all disciples of collateral branches of the Luo family. After Old Master Luo and Empress Dowager Yan Shi got married, the focus of the entire Luo family shifted from eastern border country to the holy capital of Chu. At this moment, Luo, Chu's Luo. Chapter 1593. A palm-sized, oval-shaped strange object suddenly appeared in the hands of the Luo clan disciples. It looked like an enormous egg, but it could be held in a person's hand. On one end, there was a thin, wire-like thing that pierced through it. At this moment, under Master Luo's command, these Luo clan disciples all held this strange egg-like thing in their hands, and then pulled out the iron wire on it. Just as everyone was wondering what they were going to do, they saw them throw these strange oval-shaped objects out. Their targets were the siege ballistae that were being pushed by Great Yong's soldiers towards them. With the power of these ballistae, the closer they were, the more powerful they would be. The next volley of ballistae would probably be able to completely blast open the gates of Dingqing. However, at this moment, everyone saw those strange oval-shaped objects being thrown at the siege ballistae, and then with a boom, those ballistas that were specially built and could not be destroyed even if a Saint Realm expert attacked them with all his might. However, they were completely destroyed by that small oval-shaped object. Everyone watched this scene with their mouths agape. The generals at the rear of Great Yong's army originally had their arms crossed, complacently and coldly waiting for Dingqing's gates to be completely blasted open and for the army to march in. At that time, they would take action and capture Empress Dowager Yan Shi and the others under the despair of Great Chu. However, who would have thought that what awaited them was not the destruction of Dingqing's gates? Instead, it was the destruction of their own siege ballistae. Seeing those siege ballistae being destroyed one after another, the Great Yong generals were furious. Bastards! They glared viciously at the Luo clan disciples who had appeared on the city walls. Kill them! We can't let these people continue their attacks. Damn it, where did these people come from? What are these strange weapons? How can they launch such a terrifying attack? Seeing the power of those strange balls, the Great Yong generals could understand even if they were stupid. If they allowed the enemy to continue attacking like this, and if they had enough strange weapons in their hands, their siege this time would probably fail on the verge of success. How could they let such a thing happen? They immediately attacked, charging towards the top of the city walls. Inside Dingqing, the people of Great Chu were also stunned by the powerful attacks of Old Master Luo and the others. When the Luo clan people had been hiding on the side, these Great Chu soldiers were not without objections. They had risked their lives for the Luo clan people, but the other party was cowardly hiding on the side. If it weren't for Empress Dowager Yan Shi's prestige, these Great Chu soldiers would have rebelled long ago. Only now did the soldiers of Great Chu realize that these cowardly people of Luo clan, whom they looked down upon, had launched an attack. These people of Luo clan had been hiding on one side, not because they were afraid of death, but because they were waiting for the best opportunity to launch an attack, so that they could unleash the greatest power of those strange weapons in their hands. Just look at the destroyed siege crossbows. Chapter 1594. The people of Great Chu were pleasantly surprised. At this moment, Great Yong's generals arrived. Capture Luo Tong first. The general who was in charge of the vanguard said coldly. He raised his hand and grabbed Old Man Luo. The other party was the person Her Majesty wanted, and he was also the leader of the Luo clan's people with strange weapons. Capture the leader first. With the other party in their hands, would they still need to be afraid of the Luo clan causing any more trouble? The Great Yong generals immediately obeyed the order and rushed toward Grandfather Luo and the others. Taya! Seeing the actions of the Great Yong generals, the people of Great Chu also exclaimed, and then rushed forward to protect Grandfather Luo and the others. The strange weapons in the hands of the latter were very powerful. Without the protection of the defensive barrier, Yen City could not lose the protection of the weapons in the hands of the Luo clan. Protect Taya and the people of the Luo clan. Do not let anyone be hurt. Empress Dowager Yan Shi's voice also sounded at this time. She was just thrown to the side by Grandfather Luo when the siege crossbows were attacking, and only now did she recover. She did not have the time to ask Grandfather Luo and the others how they had such powerful and strange weapons, and only ordered sternly. No matter what, nothing must happen to Luo Tong. Nothing must happen to the people of the Luo clan. Otherwise, Yen City would really not be able to hold on. Grandfather Luo was now commanding the people of the Luo clan to attack the city below. The strange weapons in their hands were naturally the trump cards that Luo Qingtong had specially developed for the Luo clan and Grandfather Luo, spiritual energy bombs. They had a similar effect as bombs, but they were reforged by Luo Qingtong using inscriptions and refining techniques. The prototype of these spiritual energy bombs was all kinds of spiritual weapons. Luo Qingtong collected them and reforged them, adding inscriptions. After inputting a specific energy, they would explode. The higher the level of the spiritual weapon, the stronger the explosion. With Luo Qingtong's status in the black field, the spiritual energy bombs she prepared for Grandfather Luo and the others were naturally not ordinary spiritual weapons. The explosive power of these spirit weapons could easily blow the siege crossbows into pieces. Not only that, but the great Yong soldiers below, who thought that the city was defenseless and were rushing forward with all their might, were also blasted into pieces by the spiritual energy bombs. In the blink of an eye, the area of several hundred meters under the city was cleared. At this moment, he sensed the attacks of the great Yong generals. Luo Tong, surrender. All of Great Yong's high-ranking officers displayed their full strength. In the blink of an eye, the aura of power that surpassed the Saint Realm erupted from the city walls. Layer after layer of extremely terrifying and cold aura exploded. In that instant, all of the soldiers with insufficient strength were sent flying while vomiting blood by the terrifying aura superimposed upon each other. There was simply no way for them to approach those great Yong generals, let alone stop them. Even the Saint Realm experts of the Great Chu were unable to withstand the attacks of the three experts who had surpassed the Saint Realm. Boom! The faces of the great Yong generals were cold and stern, their eyes sinister and ruthless. After shaking off the great Yong generals blocking their way, they all pounced on Grandfather Luo like hawks and wolves pouncing on rabbits. Luo Tong. Seeing this scene, Empress Dowager Yan Shi wanted to rush forward regardless of everything. Chapter 1595. Boom! At this moment, an attack that surpassed the Saint Realms suddenly rushed out from the side and blasted in front of the great Yong generals, blocking their path to Old Master Luo. At the same time, boom! 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 One after another, the auras were vast and powerful, each not inferior to the attack of an ordinary peak Saint Realm expert. Shockingly, after the first wave of attacks, the second wave of attacks landed in front of the great Yong generals, blocking their path to Grandfather Luo. Not only that, but all their attacks towards Old Master Luo were also eliminated. Ha! Along with these attacks, there was a burst of laughter. Empress Dowager, you and I have been together for 40 years. Now that you have the intention to die, why don't you call us old officials together? Are you afraid that we will disturb your time with Empress Dowager underground? As these voices sounded, a figure wearing a high hat and wide belt appeared in front of everyone. It was a group of old and important officials of Great Chu. These people were all wearing court uniforms, and each of them had a dignified and solemn aura. However, there was a smile on their faces as they stroked their beards and looked at Empress Dowager Yan Shi not far away. Yes, Empress Dowager. This is not fair on your part. However, it's not so easy for you to get rid of us old officials. Yes. Look, haven't we caught up? The group of old ministers burst into laughter. Their expressions were extremely relaxed, as if they didn't come to Yen City to die for Empress Dowager Yan Shi, but to come for a spring excursion. However, everyone knew that it would not be easy for them to return. This group of old and important officials had come with the determination to die. You, Empress Dowager Yan Shi stared blankly at the old and important officials who appeared, and tears suddenly appeared in her eyes. Enough, Empress Dowager, you don't have to say anything more. An old official waved his hand. We have already arranged the affairs of the various families. This time, we came to advance and retreat together with Empress Dowager, and live and die together. You don't have to drive us away. That's right. The old officials said in a deep voice, without Empress Dowager, there would be no Great Chu today. We're all descendants of our families, so there's nothing to worry about. In Great Chu, there will be other people who will guard for us. Empress Dowager, please allow us to go through life and death with you, and enter the netherworld together. Empress Dowager's permission. The old officials bowed deeply. They were all people who stabilized the court and managed the court together with Empress Dowager Yan Shi. After more than 40 years of getting along well with each other, when they learned that Empress Dowager Yan Shi had left behind an imperial edict, intending to live and die together with Master Luo, they desperately arranged the affairs of their respective clans and traveled day and night to this city. They were the Empress Dowager's pawns. Whether they were alive or dead, they had no regrets. Empress Dowager. Empress. Empress Empress, Empress Dowager, Empress, of the Empress, Empress. Empress. The monarch and his minister had been together for 40 years, sharing life and death, sharing the underworld. Listen to my order. Empress Dowager Yen Shi's voice was cold. Surround them, drive them out of Yen City, and protect Empress Dowager and the others. As long as these people couldn't attack Luo Tong again, with the strange and powerful weapons in the hands of the Luo family, the result of this battle might be reversed. Chapter 1596. Yes, Your Majesty. Upon receiving the order, the group of old officials instantly beamed with joy. It was as if they had returned to the time when the late emperor passed away and Great Chu was in a precarious situation. At that time, they had also fought side by side with the Empress Dowager. Ha! The group of old officials laughed and attacked the great Yong generals, whose expressions had changed because of their appearance. These old farts. The great Yong generals gritted their teeth. The appearance of the group of old officials of Great Chu had disrupted their plans. Originally, the strength of Empress Dowager Yen Shi and the others in Ku City was not enough to match them. But at this moment, the appearance of these old officials blocked their attacks. The weakest of these old officials was at the peak of the Sage Realm. There was also an expert who had surpassed the Sage Realm. Although their individual strength was not as good as theirs, these old officials had a tacit understanding and telepathy with each other. When they joined forces, the strength they could exert was far above their actual cultivation. A group of great Yong generals were actually suppressed when they fought against them. Even if they had 3 experts who had surpassed the Sage Realm, they were far from being a match for the other party. This involved the fact that their strength had only been forcibly increased before. In terms of the use of strength and combat experience, they were far inferior to the group of old officials. Damn it! The group of great Yong generals was suppressed and even showed signs of being driven out of Ku City's walls. After Old Master Luo and the rest of the Luo family resolved the crisis, they immediately intensified their attacks on the Great Yong army. Boom! 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 The spiritual energy bombs in their hands were thrown out as if they were free. In the hands of the loyal branch family members of the Luo family, Luo Qingtong had refined a spatial spiritual artifact for them. The spiritual energy bombs were all stored inside, and they could be used directly when needed. This also made it impossible for the great Yong soldiers to guard against. They did not know when a spiritual energy bomb would suddenly fly over and blow them up. They could not even tell who threw it and where it came from. The people of the Luo family changed places one after another. Under the continuous attack of the spiritual energy bombs, the great Yong soldiers besieging the city had no way to get close to Ku City, let alone besieging the city. Just as Great Yong's generals were enraged by this scene, blood rushing to their heads, an ice-cold voice suddenly resounded through the sky. Great Yong! A bunch of trash. You can't even take down a mere dingqing. As soon as these words were spoken, boom! An extremely violent gust of wind swept out like a hurricane from behind the Great Yong dynasty's army. It whistled through the air and blasted toward the people fighting on the city walls with earth-shattering momentum. Bang bang bang. In an instant, the group of Great Yong's generals and Great Chu's senior officials were all caught off guard and struck by the attack. They were all sent flying by the terrifying power contained within the attack. Pooh! The only person who managed to resist for a few more breaths of time was the old official of Great Chu who had surpassed the Saint Realm. He was also blasted back by this attack. Cough cough. Saint Realm. The old official of Great Chu who had surpassed the Saint Realm clutched his chest and wiped away the blood at the corner of his lips. He looked in shock at the place where the attack had come from. Chapter 1597. No, that's not right. Didn't that saint from the Great Yong sacred dynasty die suddenly? If he hadn't died, he would never have allowed Feng Wuan to order Great Yong to do such a crazy thing and start a war against the two dynasties. After all, Feng Wuan could ignore Great Yong. But that saint from the Great Yong imperial family couldn't ignore it. Who could it be? Just as the Great Chu official was thinking this, he heard the three Great Yong transcending sage realm experts kneel down and cry out, "Marshal!" The three Great Yong transcending sage realm experts coughed up blood as they retreated. "We are incompetent. Please forgive us, Marshal." As the three Great Yong generals knelt down, the other Great Yong generals also struggled to get up and knelt on one knee. "We are incompetent. Please forgive us, Marshal." Humph. As the cold snort sounded, a figure in Great Yong's uniform appeared in the air. "You all deserve to die. With such strength, the vanguard has resisted for so long and still hasn't taken down a single city. What use does Her Majesty have for you?" As this figure appeared, the pupils of all the officials on the side of Great Chu shrank fiercely. "Great Yong's Marshal. You've become a saint." The old official of Great Chu who had surpassed the saint realm looked at the figure in front of him in disbelief. How was this possible? How difficult was it to become a saint? If becoming a saint was 10 times more difficult, then becoming a saint was 100 times or even 200 times more difficult. Without enough resources and opportunities, even if one had extraordinary talent, one might not be able to break through to the saint realm in one's lifetime. The saints of the imperial family were all supported by the foundations of the 4 sacred dynasties. Even so, it was difficult for a saint to be born sometimes, and they had to use the imperial family's secret method to forcefully advance. Under such circumstances, how could this Great Yong Marshal break through to the saint realm in such a short time? One had to know that he was also a saint realm cultivator like them. How could he suddenly break through? Humph. Are you surprised? This is naturally due to Her Majesty the Empress. The Great Yong Marshal said proudly, his words full of admiration for Feng Wuan. Her Majesty the Empress's strength and ability are not something you can imagine. Thinking of the blood sacrifice method that Feng Wuan had taught him, his eyes were filled with fanaticism. Her Majesty the Empress was definitely a peerless genius to be able to create such a method of strength improvement. Although this method was too sinister and vicious, as long as he was still alive, how many bloodlines would he not have? He could even use this method to continue his bloodline and improve his strength. In this way, his strength in the future would be unimaginable. It could be said that this method was to his heart's content. Empress Dowager Yen Shi. His gaze was high and mighty. "I'll give you one last choice. Hand over the people of the Luo clan and lead the Great Chu sacred dynasty to surrender and pledge allegiance to the Great Yong sacred dynasty. How about I let you go?" "What empress?" "The empresses EMT. To her empress emus. Empress. Empress T empresses emat empresses twos EMT empress, em. Do you think she's worthy?" Her face was filled with disdain. "All right." Hearing her words, the Great Yong Marshal was so angry that he laughed. "Great Chu's Empress Dowager Yen Shi is so unyielding. Let me see if you can still be so stubborn when you fall into my hands." Chapter 1598. Yen Shi. Seeing this scene, old Master Luo's eyes almost popped out of their sockets and he rushed over. The group of old officials of Great Chu also struggled to get up, and rushed over to this side. Empress Dowager. However, the difference in power between the Saint Realm and those who had surpassed it was too great. The Great Yong Marshal didn't even look at their attacks. Raising his hand, he deflected all of their attacks back at them. Humph. A bunch of ants. As soon as you enter the Saint Realm, you become extraordinary. In terms of strength, none of you are my match. Lie down obediently for me. The great young marshal sneered and raised his hand to grab Empress Dowager Yen Shi. At the same time, he waved his sleeve and sent Old Master Luo, who was about to rush over, and the people of the Luo family behind him, flying out. Those spiritual energy bullets were all useless against him. The Saint Realm was already another realm beyond the Saint Realm and those who had surpassed it. Even if it was the lowest level of the extraordinary realm, it had already entered another world. Those who had reached the Saint Realm and those who had surpassed it could do nothing to it. Bang! The figure of the great young marshal landed on the city wall, immediately grabbing Empress Dowager Yen Shi's throat and lifting her up high. All of you, stop, he said coldly. The old officials and the soldiers of Great Chu no longer dared to move forward. Order the 3 armies to attack the city. The great young marshal ordered with a sneer. Then, he looked at Old Master Luo, who was vomiting blood and crawling up from the ground with red eyes. You are Luo Tong. Humph. Great Chu's Empress Dowager Yen Shi is so affectionate. I'd like to see how far she can go for you. The great young marshal sneered and said to Old Master Luo, break your legs. Otherwise, I'll break her legs. As he spoke, he suddenly lifted Empress Dowager Yen Shi up. No! Old Master Luo's eyes were bloodshot. With a bang, he broke his legs and knelt in front of the marshal. I'll break her legs. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain of broken bones. Very good. The great young marshal sneered, looking at Empress Dowager Yen Shi, who was already holding back her tears, her eyes red. Empress Dowager Yen Shi, are you still unwilling to surrender? Then let's wait and see. He sneered at Old Master Luo. I'll shatter every single bone in your body. Start from the feet. No. Luo Tong, don't listen to him. No. Empress Dowager Yen Shi finally couldn't bear it anymore. She looked at the man kneeling on the ground in front of her. Tears flowed down from her eyes. No. No. She shook her head desperately, trying to end her life. However, he was shrouded in the aura of a saint. He was unable to use any of his strength, nor was he able to do anything. Luo Tong. She looked at Old Master Luo and burst into tears. The latter, however, gritted his teeth and refused to look at her. Starting from his feet, he broke his bones inch by inch. No. Hearing the sound of bones cracking, Empress Dowager Yen Shi finally couldn't bear it anymore. Her lips trembled. At this moment, boom, boom, boom. Chapter 1599. What's going on? The great young marshal turned his head, his expression suddenly turning serious. This is... He looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Behind the great young army, large amounts of smoke and dust were rising up. The enormous flying dust that covered the sky condensed into the shape of dark clouds in the sky. And within those dark clouds, what seemed to be riding the clouds and circling towards them were actually large groups of demonic beasts. Heavens! Everyone on the battlefield was attracted by the sound in the distance. Regardless of whether they were from Great Yong or Great Chu, they were all shocked, their mouths wide open as they looked at the scene in the distance. Suddenly, the Great Yong army reacted. This huge wave of beasts that came out of nowhere was actually coming from behind them. Didn't this mean that they would be the first to face this wave of demonic beasts' attack? In an instant, the Great Yong army panicked. Run! Quickly run! This was especially true for the Great Yong army in the rear, who had just arrived with the Great Yong marshal, who was panicking to the extreme. Being at the rear, they could feel the terror of this wave of demonic beasts more than anyone else. Especially the demonic beasts that were charging at the front. Heavens! They were all sacred beasts. Seeing this terrifying wave of demonic beasts that made them unable to resist, the first reaction of the Great Yong army was to run. However, they were all facing Great Yong's army, and behind them was a large wave of demonic beasts. Where could they run to? Boom! 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 The large wave of demonic beasts rushed over, instantly trampling them into meat paste. Many people didn't even have the time to scream before they were trampled to death by the demonic beasts. There were even people who were directly dismembered by the demonic beasts. In just an instant, they were torn into pieces of blood that were even finer than minced meat. Ah! A large number of Great Yong soldiers cried as they fled, screaming and trampling on each other. The entire elite and valiant Great Yong army was in chaos, no longer as domineering and arrogant as before. As for the Great Yong army that was besieging the city, they desperately fled in all directions, not caring about attacking at all. All of you, stop. The Great Yong marshal's face was filled with shock and anger. He didn't know where the beast tide had come from, nor did he know how it had appeared behind them. But if they didn't stop him as soon as possible, the consequences would be unimaginable. Scatter the beast-repelling powder. He shouted harshly. It's useless. Marshal. A Great Yong general, who had luckily escaped from the rear, was covered in blood. His complexion crumbled as he cried out, "These demonic beasts seem to have gone mad. The beast-repelling powder is completely useless." What? The Great Yong marshal's face was filled with shock. He grabbed Empress Dowager Yen Shi and was about to personally go over to resist. Right at this moment, boom! A dazzling swordlight that seemed to have suddenly shot out from the river of time and space slashed at him violently. This sword slashed through the sky and headed straight for the heavens. It flew towards him like the Milky Way. Boom! The Great Yong marshal dodged to the side. But this sword light cut through the aura around him and the imprisonment on Empress Dowager Yen Shi. With a swish, the latter broke free from his grasp and landed on the city wall. Who is it? The Great Yong marshal's face was filled with anger, and he looked viciously in the direction of the attack. Chapter 1600. The one who wants your life. With this voice, Luo Qingtong's figure suddenly appeared in the sky. That pair of blood-red eyes, filled with a cold and murderous aura, stared coldly in his direction just like that. Tong tong. Empress Dowager Yen Shi and Old Master Luo's voices sounded almost at the same time. The latter's face was pleasantly surprised, and his breath was weak. Old Master Luo had shattered the bones in his legs, but he didn't have time to shatter the rest. He looked at Luo Qingtong, who appeared in the air, and the light in his eyes was both gratified and happy. His granddaughter had returned. Great Chu was fine, and Yen Shi would also be fine. As soon as Empress Dowager Yen Shi regained her freedom, she immediately rushed to Old Master Luo's side. Looking at the man's legs that had almost turned into meat paste, she choked with sobs. At this moment, she heard Luo Qingtong's voice. She immediately raised her head in disbelief, and her face was filled with shock and surprise. The person who came was Tong Tong. It was actually Tong Tong, her granddaughter. Thinking of the sword that had just cut through the Great Yong marshal's attack that restrained her breath, Empress Dowager Yen Shi was both surprised and happy. She almost couldn't believe her eyes. "Grandmother, take grandfather to rest first." Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. Her blood-red eyes swept over Old Master Luo, and she instantly discovered the tragic shattering of his legs. Immediately, the cold light in her eyes became even more piercingly cold. Okay. Empress Dowager Yen Shi quickly calmed down. She looked at Luo Qingtong, who was confronting the Great Yong marshal, and didn't say anything. She directly and decisively retreated from the city wall with old Master Luo. Not for anything else, but for them to leave at this time and not become Luo Qingtong's worry and burden was the best help to her. Humph. You are Luo Qingtong. The great young marshal coldly sized up Luo Qingtong. Although the other party's attire and aura inexplicably gave him a strange and palpitating feeling, he did not take it to heart. Even Luo Qingtong's attack, which had cut through his aura, was nothing in his eyes. It's just that I don't know what kind of unorthodox attack it is. Furthermore, he was caught off guard. However, the first time was easy, but the second time was the same as courting death. The other party's talent and strength were indeed not bad, but in front of him, he could easily capture him with just a few moves. The great young marshal looked at Luo Qingtong's undulating sage aura, disdainfully thinking. Good, good, good. He sneered and said, you can wear out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance without any effort. Luo Qingtong, Her Imperial Majesty the Empress wants you to pay with your life for our great young imperial family. Since you have come, then obediently return with me. Do you want to leave by yourself, or do you want me to cripple you and then take you away? He coldly looked at Luo Qingtong, his gaze indescribably aloof. It was as if his words were already a rare charity to Luo Qingtong. Ha! Seeing the arrogance on his face, Luo Qingtong suddenly chuckled. Her eyes slightly narrowed, the blood within them rippling like the blood-colored nectar of the boundless hell. It was extremely beautiful, but also extremely dangerous and terrifying. Two conditions, what preferential treatment? Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. It's a pity that I won't choose either of them. Chapter 1601. At this point, Luo Qingtong's eyes burst with blood. In an instant, it was as if the Queen of Purgatory had come to the world. Boom! Luo Qingtong's figure swept up in an instant, and the heart of the 1,000-year-old soul-guiding wood appeared in her hand. At the same time, the life and death sword in her hand erupted with a blazing white light. It was a light that could annihilate everything in the world. Heaven-conquering art. Annihilation. Following Luo Qingtong's shout, the great young marshal's expression changed abruptly. The sword light emitted by Luo Qingtong was too powerful. It was so powerful that his heart was frantically warning him to be careful of danger. What was going on? How could a mere Sage Realm expert launch such a terrifying attack? His expression changed in shock, and he retreated rapidly. However, it was too late. Just now, when he did not take Luo Qingtong seriously, his fate was sealed. Boom! Luo Qingtong's attack landed heavily on his body. The light of annihilation continued to erode his external defenses and strengthen the annihilation attack. Then, with a loud boom, he was sent flying. Ah! The great young marshal screamed miserably, and then fell heavily to the ground. He lay on the ground, twitching constantly. Until the moment he was sent flying, he still could not figure out how Luo Qingtong did it. Launching such an attack as a Sage Realm expert, she sent him flying with one move. He did not have any power to fight back. Thud! Thud! Luo Qingtong walked to the front of the great young marshal with light steps. She raised her hand and stabbed her life and death sword in front of the great young marshal. Hum! The black and white sword vibrated softly. Luo Qingtong's gaze was ice-cold. She slowly watched great young's marshal below, who was convulsing and trying to get up. She lifted her foot and stomped heavily on his body, which had just risen halfway, back down. With a crack, the sage's bones, which should have been extremely tough, were instantly broken into two under Luo Qingtong's foot. Luo Qingtong's bloody eyes could find the most precise point of attack. While making the opponent suffer so much pain that he wished he was dead, he would not die easily. Which hand did you use to choke my grandmother just now? She said with cold eyes. The great young marshal was about to faint from the pain. He stared at Luo Qingtong like a ghost. Good. Luo Qingtong looked at him indifferently. You don't want to tell me. The bloody light in her eyes. Then I'll take it that you pinched both hands. As she spoke, she directly stomped her foot. A huge in Luo Qingtong's body. In an instant, from the bones to the flesh. The great young marshal's left hand was instantly stirred up by the power, like a lump of mud. Ah! He could not help trembling and screaming. Luo Qingtong's strength in breaking his bones and flesh was very skillful. Every inch of the broken bones made the great young marshal so painful that he wished he could die. You broke my grandfather's legs and broke his bones. Did you enjoy watching it just now? The smile on Luo Qingtong's lips was cold and evil. The bloody light in her eyes flickered without a trace of warmth. This was the real side of the girl who was called the supreme ocular sorcerer in the 24th century. Powerful, cold, evil, and bloodthirsty. Chapter 1602. In the past, Luo Qingtong had an old beggar who picked her up. Now, Luo Qingtong had grandfather Luo who would protect her at all costs. She was willing to seal the beast in her heart for them and try her best to live peacefully in this world. However, if anyone touched her reverse scale, then even if she had to destroy the world, she would make them pay the price. Luo Qingtong hadn't lost control like this for a long time. When she saw grandfather Luo's legs shatter, the beast in her heart had already begun to unseal. Don't worry, let's play slowly. Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. Let me think, if I hadn't arrived in time, what else would you have done to my grandfather? Now, I'll slowly return everything to you. She looked at the struggling great young marshal with a sinister and bloodthirsty gaze. She lifted her foot and crushed the bones, flesh, and blood of his hands bit by bit. During this process, the great young marshal's screams never stopped. To be able to make a saint suffer so much that he couldn't control his screams, it must be very difficult. From this, it could be seen how terrible the pain was. The great young marshal kept crying and begging for mercy, the dignity and pride of a saint vanishing without a trace. However, Luo Qingtong's eyes didn't waver in the slightest. She crushed the great young marshal's bones, flesh, and blood into a ball from his hands to his feet, but kept the surface intact. Then, just when the great young marshal thought that the torture was about to end, she lifted her foot and kicked him off the city wall. Bang! The great young marshal's body fell heavily into the mud below the city wall. Luo Qingtong's voice was cold, the blood in her eyes chilling. I'll give you a chance to live now. Her gaze swept across the great young soldiers who were crying for their parents under the attack of the beast tide, and she coldly said, I'll guarantee that whoever cuts off a piece of his flesh won't die. Following Luo Qingtong's words, the great young soldiers who had already given up all hope were instantly stunned. Soon after, as if they had grasped at a life-saving straw, they leapt to their feet and madly charged towards the great young marshal. The demon beast tide brought by Luo Qingtong was too terrifying. It was not something an ordinary beast tide could compare to. Moreover, due to the attraction of the 9-story exquisite pagoda's aura, these demonic beasts went crazy and unleashed more than 200% of their battle strength. Everything that stood in their way would suffer their frenzied attacks. The soldiers of Great Yong were simply unable to withstand the barrage of attacks. They were about to be torn apart by the horde of demonic beasts. At this moment, Luo Qingtong suddenly gave them a ray of hope. Who cared who the other party was? Moreover, this marshal of Great Yong had been crippled by Luo Qingtong and had no ability to retaliate. These Great Yong soldiers all surged towards him. Everyone wanted to cut off a piece of his flesh. Countless people were choosing who to devour. Their appearance was so crazy that it made one shiver in fear. "Don't come over, don't come over." "Ah!" the great young marshal screamed miserably. Finally, his voice was completely lost in the encirclement of the great young soldiers. Luo Qingtong coldly watched this scene, but the evil fire in her heart did not subside. Boom! Chapter 1603. Whoosh! The spirit ship instantly shot off into the distance like a bolt of lightning. Boom! 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 The demonic beasts that were madly attacking the great young soldiers sensed the departure of that extremely attractive aura. They immediately spread their hooves and spread their wings, whistling as they chased after Luo Qingtong. Following their departure, the great Chu soldiers in the city seemed to have awakened from a dream. They absent-mindedly went out to clean up the mess. Boom! Inside the spirit ship, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes flickered. She couldn't restrain the surging hostility. Her gaze was ice-cold as she led the demonic beasts into the territory of the Empire of Qin. Little Pig saw that something was wrong with her and hastily jumped in front of her. Using his two little hooves, he shook her with all his might and said, "Hey, master, calm down. Calm down. Control yourself. This is the Great Chu, not the Great Yong. Think of your grandfather. Think of Empress Dowager Yan Shi. If you destroy this place, they will be heartbroken." Little Pig's words had a slight effect. Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes met his for a moment before she turned her head away. Boom! The spirit arc abruptly changed its direction and flew toward the surrounding mountains and forests. Luo Qingtong led the demonic beasts and traversed through the uninhabited mountain range. Although the demonic beasts along the way were like candlelight being swept away by the wind, uprooting mountains and toppling trees. In the end, they bypassed a large number of towns and countries and didn't cause too much damage to the Great Chu. Little Pig felt a lot more at ease after seeing this. However, when he saw the blood-red color and emotionless coldness in Luo Qingtong's eyes that hadn't faded, his heart suddenly rose to his throat again. Luo Qingtong's appearance, damn it, it can't be that, right? Little Pig seemed to have thought of something, and his heart suddenly skipped a beat. His expression became extremely solemn. At the border of the Empire of Qin. A group of the Empire of Qin border officers and soldiers were defending against the attacks of Great Yong's army. No one had expected that Great Yong's strength would be so formidable. Just like the previous battle with Great Chu, Great Yong had also sent a saint. Just when the Empire of Qin thought that they were about to win, they suddenly attacked and killed all the generals at the border of the Empire of Qin. The soldiers of the Empire of Qin had no time to react. They didn't even have the chance to send out a message before they were completely surrounded in the border city. Massacre the city. The Great Yong official, who had relied on Feng Wuan's forbidden technique to reach the Saint Realm, spoke in a deep voice. He looked at the border city of the Empire of Qin with a cold and stern gaze. Right at this moment, boom boom boom. The demon beast tide led by Luo Qingtong had arrived. Because the distance between the Empire of Qin and Great Yong was relatively far, the war between the two sides started later than the war between Great Chu and Great Yong. After Luo Qingtong dealt with the situation at the border of Great Chu, she led the demon beast tide all the way to the border of the Empire of Qin. It just so happened that the city of the Empire of Qin had been breached and Great Yong's soldiers were about to massacre the city. Looking at the Great Yong soldiers who had begun to kill their way into the city, Luo Qingtong's eyes turned cold. With a whoosh, she rushed out of the spirit ship. People of the Empire of Qin, retreat to the center of the city. As Luo Qingtong's voice sounded, she held the heart of the 1,000-year-old soul guiding wood in her hand and used 2 annihilations to kill the Great Yong official. Then, Luo Qingtong rushed into the city and started a massacre. Chapter 1604. As more and more people were killed, Luo Qingtong's eyes became more and more bloodshot. The murderous intent and hostility in her eyes became more and more intense. Oh no! Little Pig's heart sank when he saw this scene. No, if this goes on, something will happen to this woman. That. I can't reveal it now, Master. Didn't you say you were going to Great Yong's holy capital to seek justice for Grandfather Luo? Are we going there now? Little Pig asked cautiously. At the same time, he quickly used his aura to contact Yi Qianxian, telling him to hurry over and find this woman. The only one who could stop this woman was Yi Qianming. Grandfather, the bloodshot light in Luo Qingtong's eyes flickered for a moment. Then, she remembered that she was indeed going to bring these people's corpses to Great Yong's holy capital. She wanted to avenge her grandfather, she wanted to destroy Great Yong. Boom! Luo Qingtong's figure flew up. She tossed the corpse of the saint-level Great Yong official into the spirit vessel, leading the demonic beasts in a mad dash. After returning to the border of Great Chu, she took the corpse of the Great Yong marshal, who had been skinned to the bone by the crazy Great Yong soldiers. Then, she drove straight to Great Yong's holy capital. Great Yong's holy capital. Everyone looked at the figures floating in the air outside the city in shock. These people were naturally the experts from the Black Field who came to Great Yong's holy capital with Yi Qianxian. Time's up. Are you people from Great Yong unwilling to open the door and surrender? Yi Qianxian floated in the sky above Great Yong's holy capital with his hands behind his back. That pair of blood-red sword-like eyes stared coldly at the group of people standing on the city walls of Great Yong. Ming Zun, you are too arrogant. Quite a few of Great Yong's ministers, who had relied on Feng Yuan's forbidden technique to raise their strength to the saint realm, looked in Yi Qianren's direction with cold and arrogant expressions. Great Yong's strength was no longer the same as before. With their current strength, unifying the eastern region was only a matter of time. Did Ming Zun still think that it was the same as before when the four dynasties could only look at his face and were extremely afraid of him? Several of Great Yong's officials had arrogant expressions on their faces, looking at Yi Qianxian with ridicule in their eyes. Don't think that just because you guys from the Black Field are strong, you can do whatever you want. Wasn't it just some Saint Realm experts that had surpassed the Saint Realm and the Saint Realm? It wasn't as if Great Yong didn't have any. Moreover, everyone below the Saint stage was an ant. These people were nothing in their eyes. The corners of Bei Qing and Feng Yu's lips twitched as they looked at their arrogant and disdainful gazes. They cursed in their hearts. Master was just too lazy to use more strength, but they thought that Blackfield strength was not enough. What kind of joke was that? If Blackfield really revealed all of his strength, they would be scared to death. The two of them were speechless, but Yi Qianxian's gaze was cold. All right. He nodded coldly, then suddenly raised his hand. Boom! Under the shocked gazes of countless people, the huge defensive barrier covering Great Yong's holy capital was easily torn apart like a piece of paper. At the same time, the Saint Realm officials of Great Yong who wore mocking expressions were instantly killed. Kill! Yi Qianxian waved his sleeves. He had given Great Yong a chance. They did not cherish it. Boom! A group of Blackfield experts rushed into Great Yong's holy capital. Chapter 1605. What's going on? Yi Qianxian hurried to Luo Qingtong's location. The latter was leading a horde of demonic beasts in the direction of Great Yong's holy capital. Along the way, all the cities and countries either fled or surrendered in panic. When Luo Qingtong had led the demonic beast horde to the border of Great Chu, news of her had already spread throughout Great Yong. They knew that someone was leading a horde of demonic beasts to wreak havoc in Great Yong. Thus, when they saw her, all the cities and countries in Great Yong either fled or surrendered. Following this commotion, Yi Qianxian quickly found Luo Qingtong's location. He forced Luo Qingtong's spirit boat to stop and directly flew inside. He saw Luo Qingtong inside. The young girl's eyes were so red that they were like a blood-colored nectar. The color of her pupils and the whites of her eyes were almost indistinguishable. What entered his eyes was a shocking red. There wasn't a trace of emotion or warmth in her eyes. When she saw him, there wasn't even a trace of emotion. There was only a monstrous killing intent and hostility. Boom! Luo Qingtong's figure suddenly shot up, heading straight for Yi Qianxian. Yi Qianxian's brows furrowed slightly. He raised his hand to block her attack and restrained her in his embrace. Then, he looked at Little Pig beside him. "Aya, my mother. You're finally here." Little Pig's face was still filled with lingering fear as he hurriedly hopped over. Seeing Yi Qianxian's cold and puzzled expression, Little Pig hurriedly said, "Grandfather Luo's legs were crippled by someone." The bones in his legs were shattered. When Little Pig said this, Yi Qianxian understood what was going on. So it was because something had happened to Grandfather Luo. No wonder this woman lost control. Yi Qianxian frowned as he looked at the woman who was struggling in his embrace. There wasn't the slightest trace of him in those blood-red eyes. There was only endless killing intent and the stench of blood. At this moment, Luo Qingtong looked like a ruthless killing queen who had descended from the depths of purgatory to the mortal world. She didn't care about anything in this world. There wasn't anything or anyone that could enter her heart. Seeing this emotionless Luo Qingtong, the light in Yi Qianxian's eyes immediately turned cold. He wouldn't allow this woman to ignore him, even when she was unconscious. "Luo." He called out Luo Qingtong's name and pressed her against the inner wall of the spirit boat. He lowered his head and kissed set on her on the lips on's lips. The man's kiss was tyrannical and predatory. From top to bottom, from the inside and on the outside. And on Luo Qingtong, on Luo Qingtong's. The bloody light in Luo Qingtong's eyes flickered violently. The man's aura was very familiar, so familiar that her entire soul trembled, as if it was about to rush out of her body. Buzz! The bloody light in her eyes exploded. In the next second, she grabbed the man's shirt and kissed him back with a domineering aura that was not inferior to his. "Who are you?" After the kiss, both of them were breathing heavily. At this moment, Yi Qianxian heard Luo Qingtong ask. He raised his head abruptly and saw Luo Qingtong staring at him with a pair of enchanting, blood-red eyes. The killing intent and hostility in his eyes were still there, but there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. Chapter 1606. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. "I'm your man." He looked at the young girl in front of him. There was obviously something wrong with the latter. When Luo Qingtong opened her mouth, Yi Qianxian thought she had regained her senses. However, it was obvious that this wasn't the case. However, Yi Qianxian was certain that Luo Qingtong hadn't been possessed. After all, the kiss just now was indeed her aura and feelings. In all these years, Luo Qingtong was the only one who had truly gotten close to Yi Qianxian. It wasn't to the extent that he couldn't sense it. Moreover, with his strength, no one could silently possess Luo Qingtong's body in front of him. Therefore, there was no such thing as possession. Then, he would just wait and see. After he spoke, Luo Qingtong stared at him with her blood-red eyes for a while. Then, she laughed. "Man. You're this lord's boy toy." She chuckled as she looked at Yi Qianxian. That smile was unbridled and bloodthirsty, but it also carried an incomparably domineering charm. "This lord quite likes you." As she spoke, she leaned closer to Yi Qianxian and breathed into his ear. "Come here." As she spoke, she walked to a table in front of them and hooked her finger at Yi Qianxian. Oh my God. Little Pig couldn't bear to watch anymore. Boy toy. When he saw Yi Qianqian's face turn dark, he instantly felt that he should run away as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he stayed any longer, he would be silenced at any moment. With that thought, he immediately covered his eyes and inched to the side along the wall of the spirit ship. He inched to the side of the cabin door. Then, with a whoosh, he spread his 4 little hooves and ran out as fast as he could. That speed was even faster than a mouse being chased by a cat. On the other side, Yi Qianqian's face darkened when he heard Luo Qingtong say, "Boy toy." When he saw the girl beckoning him with her finger, his face turned even darker. He's a man, not a boy toy. He gritted his teeth and looked at Luo Qingtong. This woman really wanted to anger him to death. Couldn't she be a little more obedient even when she was unconscious? This lord doesn't have a man, only a male pet. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows casually and looked at him. The blood-red ripples in her eyes were beautiful and enchanting, but also domineering beyond compare. That was a kind of domineering aura that seemed to hold the hegemony of the world in his hands. It was a kind of domineering aura of supremacy that made the world tremble. It was completely different from Luo Qingtong's usual appearance. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes at her and walked up to her. "Come here." Luo Qingtong looked at him and raised her eyebrows. She raised her hand and patted her thigh. In an instant, the veins on Yi Qianqian's forehead throbbed. He looked at Luo Qingtong with a dark expression. He didn't know what this woman wanted to do. Why is she so troublesome even when she's unconscious? However, when he looked over, Luo Qingtong misunderstood. Shy. Luo Qingtong watched as he walked in front of her. He raised his eyebrows and stopped moving after a glance. She raised her hand and pulled him over. Yi Qianxian was afraid of hurting her, so he couldn't resist. He was pulled over and sat on her thigh. The veins on his forehead throbbed. This woman. Fortunately, there was no one else here. The only one left was Little Pig, who ran away to save his life. Otherwise, Yi Qianxian didn't know what kind of expression he should use to meet people in the future. Chapter 1607. What the hell are you doing? The veins on Yi Qianqian's forehead throbbed as he gritted his teeth and growled. Naturally, I'm going to dote on you. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows slightly. Her blood-red eyes were bloodthirsty, domineering and enchanting. She lowered her head and drank a mouthful of wine. Then, she suddenly pulled down the man's neck and passed the wine in her mouth into Yi Qianqian's mouth. The latter was gritting his teeth and was caught off guard by Luo Qingtong's kiss. The strong wine entered his mouth and burned his throat, but it was not as hot as the moment when the girl kissed him. Yi Qianqian's eyes became deep and serene. He looked at the gorgeous girl who was holding him in her arms and clasped her shoulders. He was about to deepen the kiss when Luo Qingtong unexpectedly retreated at this time. She raised her hand to wipe the wine on her lips and smiled lightly. She looked at Yi Qianxian with an incomparably wicked and enchanting gaze and said, "How is it? Does this lord dote on you?" As she spoke, she raised her hand and drank another mouthful of wine. However, this time, she did not pass it to Yi Qianren. Instead, she let out a long laugh and gulped it down herself. The girl's posture was wild and unrestrained. The way she smiled was like the most beautiful rainbow and sunset in the sky. It was also like the most enchanting scenery in the world. Domineering, unrestrained, enchanting, charming. All the scenery in the world belonged to her. Yi Qianxian looked deeply at Luo Qingtong. At this time, Luo Qingtong attracted his attention more than usual. This woman was probably a poison. He was destined to fall for her for the rest of his life, and he would not rest until he died. "Feed me." After drinking that mouthful of wine, Luo Qingtong filled the wine cup in her hand again. Then, she handed it to Yi Qianxian and ordered domineeringly. The man took the glass and drank it in one gulp without saying anything. Then, he lowered his head and passed the wine in his mouth to Luo Qingtong. The way he held her was domineering and decisive. In this lifetime, he would never give this woman any chance to leave him. She was his. She was destined to be his. Ha! Luo Qingtong chuckled. She catered to Yi Qianxian's plundering. Then, with a bang, the two of them fell from their chairs. Luo Qingtong was on top of Yi Qianxian, and the two of them were lying on the ground together. Looking at the man beneath her, Luo Qingtong bent down with a smile and bit Yi Qianxian's Adam's apple. Yi Qianxian let out a muffled groan. That was the most vulnerable and fatal part of a person. With Luo Qingtong's bite, Yi Qianren used almost all of his strength to suppress the instinctive reaction in his body that wanted to fight back immediately. Luo Qingtong bit his throat and carefully ground it. At the same time, she chuckled and said, "Is this how you usually serve this lord?" The bloody light in her eyes was domineering and enchanting. Her posture was like that of an insufferably arrogant queen. Yi Qianxian finally couldn't hold back. This seductress. He abruptly turned over and stood up. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed slightly. In an instant, the bloody color in her eyes faded. At the same time, Luo Qingtong's body softly fell on Yi Qianxian's body. Luo Qi. Yi Qianxian almost immediately hugged Luo Qingtong. His breath circled around her body. After confirming that she had just fainted from overexertion, he fiercely gritted his teeth. "You woman!" Yi Qianxian hugged her. He didn't know whether to be angry or not. His entire body was boiling hot as if it was on fire. Chapter 1608. Yi Qianxian looked at Luo Qingtong and clenched his teeth. Finally, he carried her up and placed her on the bed that Luo Qingtong usually rested on. The space within the spirit ship was huge, so it was naturally equipped with all the things that one usually needed. Yi Qianxian placed Luo Qingtong on the bed with a cold face. He couldn't hold back the evil fire in his heart. He leaned over and bit the girl's lips a few times. "Just you wait. I'll settle this score with you sooner or later." He left with a cold face. Before he left, he caught Little Pig, who was running away, and ordered it to guard Luo Qingtong. When he forced her spirit ship to stop, the demonic beast horde led by the latter had been forced to retreat by his imposing aura. They should have returned to the western wilderness by now. He notified Bei Qing and the others to drive them away, so as to prevent them from causing trouble in Great Yong. After all, he was going to give this sacred dynasty to Luo Qingtong. Naturally, he couldn't let those demonic beasts destroy it. Hiss. After Yi Qianxian left for a long time, Luo Qingtong slowly woke up. When she woke up, she found that her lips were swollen. She didn't know what had bitten her. Luo Qingtong sat up while hissing softly. She looked up and saw Little Pig, who was guarding by the side. She immediately grabbed it and asked, "What's going on? Why am I here? And what happened to my mouth?" Luo Qingtong's voice was a little hoarse. Before she lost consciousness, she drank a lot with Yi Qianxian. Now, all the after effects were showing. Luo Qingtong's tongue was a little numb. She had kissed Yi Qianxian too much. In short, she felt that something was wrong. Especially her mouth. Luo Qingtong covered her head, feeling dizzy. She could only remember that when she was at the border of Great Chu, she seemed to have been blinded by anger. After that, it seemed to have gone out of control. Luo Qingtong frowned. She had the problem of losing control and losing consciousness when she got too angry. This problem had existed since her previous life. When she loses control, she becomes extremely cold and bloodthirsty. Before she recovers, she will only do one thing, and that is to kill. Moreover, it did not differentiate between friend and foe. This was also the reason why Luo Qingtong was so cold and aloof in her previous life. She had almost become the public enemy of the world's forces and ability users. Once she went berserk, she simply could not control herself. But sometimes, Luo Qingtong was conscious. But those times were very, very few. Almost every time Luo Qingtong woke up, there were corpses everywhere. As time passed, no one dared to provoke her in her previous life. Even if he did, it would be an assassination. Luo Qingtong tried her best to control her temper. She did not expect that old Master Luo's accident would release the beast in her heart. Luo Qingtong's expression was grave. She looked at Little Pig and asked, "Are the people from Great Chu okay?" Luo Qingtong did not care how many people she killed. She only cared about whether old Master Luo and the others were okay. She lost control. Did they also lose control? No. Little Pig hurriedly shook his head. Oh. He hurriedly added, "It's just that old Master Luo's legs are crippled. Other than that, he's fine." But. They're fine, but you're in big trouble. Master. Little Pig looked at Luo Qingtong with a bitter expression. He also did not expect that Luo Qingtong would become like that when Yi Qianxian came. Chapter 1609. What boy toy, what incessant flirting. There were also some things I didn't even see when I ran away. I'll definitely be punished for all of these in the future. Whine. Little Pig looked at Luo Qingtong as if he wanted to cry, but no tears came out. The latter frowned and looked at him. "Why are you crying if there's nothing going on?" "I'm clearly crying because of you." Little Pig had been warned by Yi Qianxian to keep his mouth shut. There was no way he could tell Luo Qingtong the truth. However, Luo Qingtong wasn't someone to be trifled with. She quickly connected the dots between Little Pig's unusual expression and the fact that nothing happened to her when she went berserk. Yi Qianxian is here. Only that man could control her when she went berserk without hurting her. Luo Qingtong looked at Little Pig. Little Pig hummed and nodded in affirmation. Ahem, Luo Qingtong coughed lightly. She raised her hand and touched the bite mark on her lips. She had a bad premonition. She asked, "Did I do something very bad to him?" Luo Qingtong looked at Little Pig. Little Pig's eyes told her, "Very bad. Very bad. The kind that would be punished at any moment." Oh my God. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Humph. Although this guy wasn't very reliable, he wouldn't lie to her about this kind of thing. Oh no. What did I do to Yi Qianxian when I lost control of my consciousness? Luo Qingtong felt conflicted. In the past, when she lost control of her consciousness, she would kill someone. Now that she transmigrated, she developed a new ability. And it was targeted at that man. Luo Qingtong felt like her balls were about to explode. Forget it, I'll just run away and lie low for a while. I'll wait until that man's anger subsides. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong prepared to leave on the spirit ship. At this moment, she suddenly remembered something. She frowned and asked Little Pig, "How long have I lost control of my consciousness?" "Since I lost control." 3 days. Little Pig looked at Luo Qingtong. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and jumped up. Oh no. The grand meeting of the 4 academies. When Great Yong dispatched troops to the Empire of Qin and Great Chu, the 4-courtyard grand banquet was about to begin. Perhaps it had already begun. Go. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. She raised her hand and patted the control hub of her spirit boat. Then, with a swoosh, the entire spirit ship flew toward the holy capital of the Great Qi dynasty like a bolt of lightning. While Luo Qingtong was rushing to the holy capital of the Qi. In the holy capital of the Great Qi dynasty, the 4 academies tournament had already begun. Feng Wuan sneered as he led the members of the Great Yong Sacred Academy to sit below the stage, watching the battle on the stage. The people from the Empire of Qin and Great Chu were quite lucky. They had drawn each other, so Feng Wuan could only deal with one of them for the time being. Don't worry. Once the grand meeting of the 4 academies came to an end, they could still kill all the people from Great Chu and Great Qin who came to participate in the grand meeting. Feng Wuan wouldn't let them go back alive. Especially Ma Chenyi. Feng Wuan looked coldly at the refined youth sitting on the grandstand of the Empire of Qin. The Empire of Qin actually produced a true dragon this time. Moreover, it was a sage realm cultivator. Thinking that the other party's strength should have been his, Feng Wuan's heart was filled with resentment. It's a pity that Luo Qingtong didn't come. Otherwise, she would have died without a burial ground. But it doesn't matter. After we destroy the Empire of Qin and Great Chu, she will still die. Chapter 1610. Does Luo Qingtong think that I can't do anything to her just because she hides like a coward? What a joke. The world is so big. As long as I want her to die, she won't escape. Without the protection of the Black Field, how long can she be free and unfettered with the protection of the Empire of Qin and Great Chu? The Empire of Qin and Great Chu don't know how much Great Yong's strength has increased. By the time the 4 academies tournament is over, Great Chu will probably be destroyed. At that time, with the might of destroying Great Chu and merging the 2 dynasties, even if the Great Qin realized that Great Yong's strength was extraordinary, what could they do? Sooner or later, Great Yong will be hers. Moreover, she doesn't plan to let Ma Chenyi and the others return alive from this 4 academies tournament. At that time, without this true dragon of the Empire of Qin, what hope does the Empire of Qin have? Either they will be destroyed by me, or they will have to surrender. From now on, I will be the sole ruler of the eastern region. Feng Wuan's expression was arrogant. She sneered at the competition between Great Chu and the Empire of Qin. Without any suspense, the Empire of Qin won all the way. Su Xiaoxiao, Little Gangster Yuan, Ling Tianhan and the others, under Luo Qingtong's guidance and the resources of the Empire of Qin's Sacred Academy, their strength and potential soared. A group of people who were once judged as trash by Tianyu Academy, destined to stay in the trash class, entered the Empire of Qin's Sacred Academy under Luo Qingtong's lead, and participated in the 4 academies tournament. They competed among the geniuses of the 4 great sacred dynasties. Among them, Ling Tianhan and Sima Zhu were already in the top 50 of the Rising Dragon roll. One of them was good at using both swords, and his swordsmanship was superb. The other was full of poison, and none of the young geniuses could ignore his attacks. Even the geniuses of the Rising Dragon roll who were stronger than him didn't dare to take his attacks lightly. If it wasn't for the fact that the 2 of them didn't have enough time to cultivate, their strength was still shallow, and the power in their bodies was limited, they could have directly charged into the top 10 of the Rising Dragon roll. As for Little Gangster Yuan, Ling Yuhe, Ling Tianchen and the others, they were also on the Rising Dragon roll. In the competition of non-combat professions, Su Xiaoxiao and Yu Qingya were the most stunning. The Yu's was the rising of the Rising Dragon roll, Yu's great Yu's. Using half the time that other people used to refine medicine, he was able to refine a medicinal liquid that was twice as powerful as the other people's medicinal liquid. Yuan is Yu. This was the first time that a pure alchemist had defeated a martial artist in battle with his own alchemy skills. In an instant, many of the pill halls of the sects in the hidden world turned their attention to Su Xiaoxiao. And just like Su Xiaoxiao, Yu Qingwei was also the center of attention. This young girl had used her own unique method to refine semi-finished pill elixirs at such a young age. After her battle with Luo Qingtong, she went into seclusion for several months and broke through the realm of medicine master in one fell swoop to refine genuine pill elixirs. He had successfully become an alchemist. Although she was still a distance away from becoming a true alchemist, she was the first person after the evil Dr. Ghost Eye to break through to the alchemist realm in her 20s. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.